All right, fucking let's get it. Yes, sir. What's poppin' with y'all, man? Welcome back to another motherfucking episode of the Thin Line Between Genius and Insanity podcast. I am the flyest, highest, coolest, smoothest host of them all. OG Hatch, man. You know what the fuck it is, man. What's up with the people all around the world? Fuck is up with y'all, man? Hopefully out there looking good, feeling good, staying safe. It's a whole lot of shit going on in them churches, man. I tell you that each and every week. We all on the grind at 100. This is episode 90. So I want to say shout out to everybody around the world that's tapped in and joined the conversation, man. I truly appreciate all the love and support. You know I give it up, man. This is a very, very special episode. It's not special because I'm special. You know that already. It's special because I have the beautiful Loryn Denise on the podcast, man. The queen of grief. How are you doing?
I am good. How are you? I love the intro. It's like
that woke me up. I'll be honest.
getting the hype this morning.
For sure. I do want to say I'm ecstatic to have you on the podcast. You know, you are somebody in this podcast space that I've truly grown to admire. You know, and grow and draw inspiration from, just because the way you carry yourself, the way your content comes off. So it is an honor for me to have you on this platform. You know, the goal of this podcast was always to be like an audio journal for myself. But also, along the way, I want to bring on dope individuals, especially dope Black individuals, who I just felt was extremely creative and dope. And I want to make sure I shine some light on it, even if it's small, you know what I'm saying, or what. But I want to make sure I shine light on these dope individuals. So once again, thank you very much for coming on to this platform.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Thank you. Well, you know, 2022, it's a lot going on. You know what I mean? And saying it's like a new movie, same characters, don't really matter how I say it. I always want to start with my guests a mental health check. On a scale of 1 to 10, I want you to start this podcast off letting the people know how you're doing physically, emotionally, financially, you know, all that good stuff. So how are you doing a mental health check, Miss Loryn Denise?
If I were to give like an honest, you know, people are like, I'm good. How are you? Right? Like, no, we off that. I would say, you know, like currently right now, I would give myself about a 7. And the reason that I say that is because I've really, like, I don't know how, you know, spiritually sound, you know, people are, or you are, or anything like that. But like something that I've really been praying for is peace. And peace no matter what's going on around me, because I can't confidently say I've always operated in that space of just having peace no matter what's happening around me, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why I would say a 7, because maybe financially I'm not where I'm at yet, or physically I'm not where I'm at, right? But because I have so much peace about whatever the next step is or what's going to happen, that's why I would say a 7. I don't think, to me, if you say like, oh, I'm at a 10, that's great. But I feel like that's not always true, right? Because I feel like there's always going to be something. But the reason why I say a 7 is because, yes, there's something, but I have peace about it no matter what's going to happen. Even in the midst of chaos, I still have peace.
Isn't that an amazing attribute to have? To have peace in the middle of chaos. I'm really trying to get there. I'm trying to change my life around. Make sure I reached up, you know, that moment in my maturity and things of that nature. You know what I'm saying? I'm still young, 26 years old. So I have a lot of, you know what I'm saying, fuck nigga tendencies at time. That slow me down. But in the middle of chaos, I found that it is very important to find that peace, because that can stop you from making more rash decisions, and that can just stop you from going down the wrong path in life. So I'm definitely glad to hear that you're keeping it real. You know what I'm saying? At a 7, to be completely honest with you, I'm a person who deals with mental health, depression, and anxiety and things of that nature. So a 7 is a damn 10 in my eyes. So I am glad to hear that you're doing good, in all honesty.
Thank you.
You know, the main reason, one of the main reasons I want to bring you on this podcast is because, as you see, the title of this episode is called The Queen of Grief. And the reason why I want to bring it up is because your podcast, the This Too Shall Suck podcast, and you give a very different point of view on grief on many topics. And I'm somebody who, I never truly think about grief, to be completely honest with you, until I come across somebody where I'm like, oh, they didn't get over that last shit. Like they struggling for real. But listen to your podcast, listen to your content. It allowed me to realize in myself that no, it's a lot of shit that I'm still struggling with internally as well, that I just pass over and think that, you know what, I'll just get over it. But you never truly get over it until you identify those situations. You know what I mean? So that's what I wanted to make sure I brought you on this podcast so we can let all the friends of the show know that there are many different versions of grief and that we all go through them pretty much on a day-to-day basis. So I wanted to make sure we came and had this conversation on this podcast and make sure that we express that different point of view for people and try to help people, you know what I'm saying, mold themselves into better people. So I do want to ask you that before we even get into that. We are in the middle of a pandemic. Still, right?
Right. Literally in the middle of a pandorama. Right. We're in a Panda Express, y'all. Just everyone relax.
And if I did my research correctly, you started your podcast in 2020?
2020, yep.
2020, same as me. Yep. So right in the start of this whole pandemic.
Literally, April 2020, literally.
My show is July, so I'm definitely with you. I want to ask you, during this pandemic, for starting the podcast and things of that nature, you basically took on new ventures in life. So you started new journeys and things of that nature to better yourself or to do whatever you want to do in your life. So I want to ask you about yourself. What did you learn about yourself during the pandemic, and how did it change how you move?
Ooh, that's a good one. What did I learn about myself during this pandemic? I think a few things. I think the first thing that I learned is to trust myself and know that like my intuition and how I feel, that's enough for me to, move on that. Right.
Yeah.
Outside of obviously like moving, like when God tells me to move, like trust that gut feeling that you have. And I think a lot of us kind of came face to face with ourselves during the pandemic. And whether we liked it or not, that's a whole different conversation. But, I learned like you got to trust whatever that feeling is. So, for example, like during the pandemic, so I started this podcast in April of 2020, right? And in October of 2020, I quit my job, and I've been doing this full time now, almost 2 years. And but in that moment, like the moment that I decided to quit my job, I was just like the feeling. I was like, oh my God. But like I was like, you gonna quit your job in the middle of a pandorama.
You
don't have right. Like you don't like I didn't have like a plan. You know how some people like, okay, I have this much money saved. Like I didn't have a plan. I just knew that feeling because when we're talking about mental health, right?
Yeah.
My mental health was in a space when I was at that job that was becoming unhealthy for me. And I'm like, I'm not staying somewhere for the sake of a paycheck to ruin who I am as a human being. Because you can get a paycheck for anywhere. I could have worked at Chick-fil-A. I could have went anywhere, right? But like what matters to me more is my mind. And when I feel like I'm losing a piece of that, like when people are like, oh, I'm losing my mind. Like I really felt like I was losing a piece of my mind and was about to go in a spiral. I had to make the decision that was best for me and to trust that decision and know like, hey, Loryn, like what you know about yourself is that you have a work ethic and a hustle that you can make things work and you're smart and you're, all of these things, right? And you also know you have the faith inside of a mustard seed. So you know God gonna keep you, which he has this whole time, right? But like I didn't know that about myself because like I've always been a person like you ask any of my friends, they're like, Loryn's always like got some entrepreneur grind or she's got a side hustle, right? But like I can't ever say I fully trusted myself until that moment. But I had to come face to face with myself, obviously, we all did, and be like, Loryn, like trust, like if you have a feeling, they talk about women's intuition, but I think everyone has an intuition. If you have an intuition, trust that about yourself. Don't like think that your intuition and how you feel is not enough for you to move in a way that you need to move. Because I think we're all scared of that. Like, no, about that. No, like your intuition is enough. Like follow that intuition and move according to that intuition, because a lot of times the intuition like that, it's a spirit check. That's all it is. It's just a spirit check. So trust that intuition. So that's what I would say as I learned about myself really is like really trusting, who I am, my intuition, and knowing like you can trust yourself and you got it.
That's dope as fuck. I'm being honest with you. Honestly, because I'm in that phase of my life. I've been working in corporate America for the last like 6 years now, and I hate it. I fucking hate it. It's not me. It's truly not me at all. And we talked, in the pre-meet about how I feel like I'm not a podcaster yet, and I think it's literally because I haven't took that leap to where I fully committed. I'm like 80% in, and that 20% is a fucking lot, and it really holds you back. And when you're not reaching your goals that you really set for yourself. I really just felt everything you just said right there. And also you brought up women's intuition. Guys, we have intuition, fellas. Jesus fucking Christ. Like, you never heard a man say, yeah, my manly intuition. No.
Right.
Nobody ever says that.
Never. Right.
But I think that also leads into why a lot of, I don't want to just say men, but I'm going to speak for men. I think that's why a lot of times we second guess ourselves. Because we'll have that intuition, you know what I mean? But we don't really act on it unless it's something small, you know, something very minuscule. But if it's big, like it's quitting your job to help chase your dreams and what you want to do, a lot of times we second guess ourselves. Well, at least I'll speak for myself on that end, because I do think of the worst, you know what I mean? Like I plan for the worst, never truly expect any, you know what I'm saying, anything good to happen. If it happens, we balling, going to Chick-fil-A, number 5, please.
Right. But I think a lot of that comes too, Hatch, with like for men, I'll say specifically, you all have like a lot of, we all do, right? But like for men specifically, y'all have societal pressures of like having to be the security, the provider and all those things, right? Yeah. And so if you go and just quit your job willy-nilly and you're like, and say you're in a relationship or you're married or whatever the case may be, have a partner and you go and like quit your job to chase your dreams and it doesn't work out, like you do immediately have to think about those things, right? Yeah. For me, I didn't have to think about those things. Like I was single female. Like I don't have to think about, I don't have any kids. Like I don't have to think about any of that, right? But I do understand that like sometimes there's societal pressures or there's just like normal pressures that you have, obviously, in life that don't allow you to do that. So I'm not telling people to go out here like quit your job. Whoa. Like I just happen to be in a different situation. But like to your point, like I think a lot of that for men, and again, you're a man, so I can't speak for you guys, but what I see is a lot of that comes from those societal pressures of having to operate and be a certain way. So you can't act on your intuition the same way, like they say a women's intuition, like we just are able to move differently. That's all it comes down to.
Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely jealous of that. You know what I mean? I'm definitely jealous of that. But I do understand what you're saying. I totally agree. I totally agree. The second part of the question is, how did that change how you move going forward? I guess the real question is, knowing that you took that leap of quote unquote faith and you made the right decision, obviously, did that change how you move going forward about how you thought about other decisions after that?
Absolutely. Because I'm like, and it's funny because, you know, it took, even though like I knew like, okay, you can trust yourself and you can do this, in the midst of those hard moments, I'm like, ooh, I don't know if you can do this. Right. Yeah. You know, but those are just realizations that happen. Right. But it did like, so in those moments when it was like, ooh, I don't think you can do this, I would like swiftly remind myself of like, you're doing it and you've done it. Right. And so I think that's the biggest thing is like, when I made the leap or, you know, when I understood I can trust myself and trust God in the process, right? Like even in this moment that's really hard right now and you're looking like, whoo, I don't know if this is for you. I just swiftly reminded myself like you've been doing it. Well, number one, you did it. Yeah. You've been doing it and you're continuing to do it, right? And so yeah. I do now move in a certain way when I have those moments. Like I allow myself to have those moments. Like I think a lot of that is, you know, learning and grief. Like I allow myself to process those moments, but then understanding and giving myself the grace and credit to know like, yes, maybe, you know, this is a hard moment, but you did it. You're doing it and you're going to continue to do it and you'll be fine. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I definitely understand you. So you just have a very, you just say it way better than me. Because when I do stuff and I challenge myself, I'm like, I'm that nigga. Like, I can't be stopped. I grew up watching Kobe. Like,
but that's good too. Listen, however, you need to hype yourself and remind yourself that you are that, like you then do what you need to do.
No, thanks. Definitely appreciate that. You know what I do want to talk about, you know, because I'm not just talking to some regular, you know, some regular person, all the friends of the show. This is Loryn Denise, host of the #1 grief podcast in the world, Craig. You know, so this Too Shall Suck podcast. Make sure you gotta check that out by the motherfucking way. Yeah. I want to start this off because everybody has a journey. I mean, everybody has a story, I should say. I let my little brother know that all the time. Everybody has a story. Never think your story is, you know what I'm saying, worse than anybody else's. You really never know what the fuck they went through. Mm-hmm. And one of the main things about this podcast, you know what I'm saying, centers around my trauma of not having my father, who was murdered when I was 3 years old, me growing up having to be a man, learn on the fly and shit like that. So a lot of my trauma bleeds out through my podcast. Sometimes I hate it. Sometimes I love it. It lets the people know exactly who I am and they fuck with me for me. But I want you to take all the friends of the show back in time. What made Loryn Denise the queen of grief?
I think what made me the queen of grief is just not being afraid to talk about it and
Mm,
not being afraid to share my story with it and not and understanding that me doing that and sharing my story and just being vulnerable allows people to not feel alone
yeah.
in it, right? Because to your point, we're all going through something. We all grieve something.
Mhm.
But what I learned when I kind of got into that heavy part of grief, which I know we'll talk about a little bit,
Yeah.
um, that there was a lot of resources on like when you lose someone, like when you lose your dad, when you lose your mom, right? Or when you lose a sibling, whatever the case may be. But there wasn't a lot of resources that I saw about just grief in general. Like, why are we not talking about the grief of being Black in America, a Black man, a
Mm,
Black woman? Why are
yeah.
we not talking about the grief of when you lose a job, especially in the middle of a pandemic? Why are we not talking about the grief of being faced with yourself when they're in the middle of a pandemic? Why are we not talking about the grief of losing your identity, whether left corporate and now you're in this entrepreneurship, but you had this identity, right?
Hmm.
Or now you're a mom and now you've gotten wrapped up in your children and your family and you lost this person who you were. Why are we not talking about those things, right?
Right.
And so really, I guess like just understanding that and knowing like we have to talk about this more, especially, I'm 34. So like as a millennial, like we are the ones who are coming up and we have to talk about it. We're the ones who are having mental health issues because back in the day, it was like, we don't go to no therapy unless you crazy, right? And
Yeah.
even then, like, it was just like,
Yeah.
oh, they just a crazy auntie or crazy uncle, right? Like,
Hmm.
or what happens in this house stays in this house, right? It's like, no, well, what happened in this house is the reason why I'm screwed up as an adult,
Right. And it's
right?
happening in every other house as well.
It's happened in every other house, right? And understanding that, like, hey, how you're feeling is valid. How you're feeling, you're not alone. And how
Yeah.
you're feeling doesn't make you crazy. Like, that is like you have gone through this traumatic experience. And that's something that also, like, we have to talk about is trauma. Like, my trauma doesn't get to trump your trauma, right?
Mm,
Like, you lost your dad, but I lost both my parents. That doesn't mean that, like, my trauma is worse than yours because I lost both my parents and you lost one, right?
right.
Or that somebody lost their dog and I lost both my parents, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I think that's something we have to talk about as well is we try and put this like, well, this is big trauma, this is little trauma. Trauma is trauma, right?
Hmm.
Depend like because I don't get to tell you that because got rejected as a child, and now you are on this spree of like having a whole bunch of sexual partners because you got rejected. Like, I don't get to say like, oh well, that like girl, yeah, that's fine because you that's just like, I don't get to say that to you,
Right.
right? And so like really, I guess to answer your question, I know that was a long way to answer your question, but
No, we love it.
really, but
We
becoming
love
that
it.
like, that queen of grief of I just want to be the advocate for people who feel unseen, unsafe, and unheard. And that's
Mm,
what happens with grief is you feel not safe, you feel not seen, and you don't feel heard. And that's why there's such a that's why it's such a taboo topic. That's why like all this stuff is trying to come around. They're trying to make grief a mental disorder. All this crazy stuff is coming with it because we as society don't feel like it's a normal thing that we should talk about because it's so sad, right? But we
mhm.
don't talk about the beautiful journey that comes from it. We don't talk about the lessons that we learn from it. We don't talk about, all of the just transitions and beautiful moments that happen from it. We don't talk about that. And so that is why I'm on this mission, is
Yeah.
because we have to talk about it because I didn't have a place to talk about it. And I want to give other people that place to talk about it. Right. So,
Yeah.
that is why I am the queen of grief.
No, I love it. Trust me, I truly love it. And that's another thing that I love about your podcast and your platform because you're shining light on topics that people generally don't talk about. And that's really what I like to do when I bring guests onto this podcast is have conversations about things that people really don't talk about. Things we all think about. You could be fucking washing the dishes or fucking watching commercials or something, and that thought will go through your head, and you'll probably go off on a side conversation with yourself about 10, 15 minutes about that topic. But once you get around people, it's the same old bullshit. We do
Mm-hmm.
this SRTs. It's you see the NBA playoffs. You know what I'm saying? You
Right,
know
right,
what I'm
right,
saying? Get money schemes and stuff like that. For women, I'm pretty sure you guys have your own normal conversation that you always have. Maybe updated, but it's the normal same conversations.
right.
And that's the main thing I really want to do with guests on my platform, and that's one thing I really appreciate what you do on your platform is you bring on these guests and you shine light on not only their story but also the anonymous stories out there, because when you guys are talking, you are hitting on things that people are listening who you don't even know are going through that same shit. You know what I'm saying? That's
Right.
the power of podcasts. That's the power of this platform. That's the power, so technology now is that you can have these conversations that can spread across a large mass of people, and then they can all relate to you, and they can also appreciate the grind, the journey that you're actually going through. So
Yeah.
I definitely appreciate what you're doing. It's dope as fuck to actually see, to be honest with you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem at all. You touched on it. You know what I'm saying? Obviously, everyone knows I lost my father. I talk about it every fucking week. But you lost both your parents.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm gonna talk about a little later in the podcast when we talk about normalizing death and things of that nature, because as me, somebody who lost their father, I've always had that thought in the back of my mind, like, yo, man, if I lose my mom's, like, I'm already fucking crazy. If that happens, I'm pretty sure that's gonna be the straw that breaks the camel's back. But I've thought about it, so it may help me with that process. But we're gonna get into that a little bit later. I want to talk about the struggle of losing both your parents, because
Mm-hmm.
listen, I was listening to your podcast and you went through the story time and you told the story, so you don't have to really go into too much into detail about that. But I do want to ask you about the struggle of losing both your parents, because that's a big fucking blow. That's two big fucking blows. That's like Mike
Mm-hmm.
Tyson and Ali, like, what's up, nigga? Like, you know what I mean? So I want to talk about the struggle of losing your parents, and also to double up with that, was the process at any way, easier to deal with the second time around?
Yeah. So I think to your point, like you said, so there's an episode, like you said, y'all can definitely listen to story times. We'll be here all day if I go into the story time. But I think I'll answer the second question first and then kind of come back. So
Sure.
the process wasn't easier.
Hmm.
I just adjusted, I think, a little differently. I don't want to say more quickly, a little differently than I did with my mom. So my mom passed away in 2015, and then my dad passed away in 2019. And so with my dad, when he told us he had cancer, so he told us he had cancer in May of 2019, and then he
Yeah.
passed away in August of 2019. So it was fairly quick, right?
Yeah.
My mom, she had breast cancer in 2014 and then passed away in 2015, right? So that was a little bit longer, right?
Honestly, thick as fuck too. Jesus
Right.
Christ.
Yeah, yeah. So it was just one of those things of when my dad told me, as he originally told me, and he's like, I don't need you to tell anybody, like, don't tell your sibling. I have 4 siblings. He's like, because it, it's funny because your parents know. I don't know if you're an only child or not, but like if you're not, like your parents kind of know where their kids are. Like they
Yeah.
know how their kids line up. And for me and my family, I just happen to be the one, which is
Hmm.
that's a whole nother grief in itself, right? Because he told me first, and I think he told me that because he knew I had to process it first, because he knew if something happened, he knew who was going to be the one to kind
Yeah.
of, you know.
Yeah.
So when he told me, what happened is, Hatch, I had to go to a place, and people are like, "What?" But it's the truth. I had to go to a place of like, what does it look like if he dies? Because I had already been through it with my mom, and I was like, what did that look like when she died?
Hmm.
Right? What is it going to look like if he dies? What does that look like? And
Yeah.
I had to like literally like pull that moment, or they call it like grief moments or grief, I can't remember the words, but like you basically pull this grief out of you, right? Grief sessions, that's what they call it. Like I had a grief session where I had to pull that out of me, like what does that look like if your dad dies?
Mm.
And I had to go to that place, and I think so when it happened, I had already been to that place
Yeah.
because I had pulled that out of myself in May when he told me. So in August when it happened, it didn't make it easier. Like it's still like what are you talking about? Like I was just talking to him. As you heard in the podcast, I was in the room when both my parents died. And
Yeah,
so
crazy as fuck.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
and with my dad, it was like super dramatic. My dad was like that. Like, so of course, I was like, of course you went out like that. Like,
Yeah.
it was just like super like dramatic, like head rolling to like, it was just dramatics, right? Just,
Those were the ones. It was like, okay, yeah, yeah.
it was just like, people coming in the room, lights, like, it was just ridiculous, right? So like when it happened, it was kind of like, although it and and it's gonna sound crazy, but like, so when it was happening,
Mm-hmm.
I was of course having a moment. I couldn't breathe, all this crazy stuff. But then, like, at that moment when my sister came, my sister was the medical power of attorney at the time. I was like, whatever decision you have to make, because again, I had already kind of been in that moment. So I had to be like, hey, whatever decision you need to make, like,
Yeah,
we're
make it. Yeah.
make it. Like, because I know it's going to suck for you, but I had
Mm-hmm.
already been to this moment 6 months ago.
Yeah.
And so, like, so when it happened, it was just, it again, it didn't make it easier. I just kind of adjusted a little differently than before. And so the struggle then lied of, losing both my parents, because again, my dad died in August, right? So then immediately we go into the holiday season, right?
Wow.
And my birthday's in October. Then you have Thanksgiving, then you have Christmas, you have new, all of these things. And so I think the struggle was really, for me, understanding that I didn't process my mom's grief properly. And I didn't realize that until my dad died. And so now I'm being met with grief from my dad, but then now this grief from my mom being triggered from that I never fully processed. Now they're meeting face to face. And now it's like, not only do I have the grief of my dad, but I have the grief of my mom, and then I have the grief. So like all this compounding grief. And so
Yeah.
I'll say the struggle is that you have compounding grief, because like you essentially start realizing things that maybe you didn't do properly, like in the past,
Mm-hmm.
because some people's parents have died like within like 90 days of each other, like 6 months of each other, like, really, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. That should be
it,
crazy.
like, mine was 3 years, which is still like not far away, but like, there's people who like don't have a chance to like fully process it. And so, I think the struggle for me was, I recognized that I didn't fully process my mom. So
Mm-hmm.
now, like, I'm being like double down with grief, because now I have to deal with my dad's grief and then my mom's grief at the same time. And that was the biggest struggle, is like, I don't, now you have to deal with all of this grief at the same time, because you didn't deal with it properly the first time.
Yeah.
And so that was really the biggest struggle for me, is really having to deal with them both at the same exact time during the holiday season, especially.
Yeah. Around the holidays, because we all like super emotional around that time anyway.
Seasonal grief. Seasonal grief. It's a real thing.
um, in regards to your mom, when I with the mindset, I guess, when I was listening to that episode, and everyone, please go check it out. You know what I mean? Like I said, I wouldn't be bringing her on here if I really didn't think that she can help not only me, but everyone who's tapped in to join this conversation, because we all go through this shit on one way or another on many different levels. But when I was hearing the story portion about your mother, it seemed like, as you know, obviously, it progressively got worse and things of that nature
Mm-hmm.
until the end. But it seemed like she was kind of still herself throughout the process. And I wanted to make sure I asked her. I didn't want to put her on the docket because, when you ask people certain questions about certain topics, you never want to offend, even if it's on accident, things of that nature.
Right.
But I wanted to ask you, like, going throughout that process, because it seemed like it was totally different from the process your dad went through.
Mm-hmm.
Did seeing your mom continue to be herself throughout that process, that make you feel, how did that make you feel, I should say, if that makes any sense?
Mm, I think it's one of those things, like, you were hopeful, right? And then you lose hope very quickly.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say it hurts more, because again, she, like, to your point, she was, still herself and trying to do the things. But like, obviously I saw her getting skinnier, getting sicker, things like that. And at the time I was living in Phoenix, so I wasn't like fully in it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But it gave you a sense of hope
Yeah.
that quickly gets taken away from you. And that sucked, I would say, a lot, the most. Like with my dad, like it just happened so quick.
Mm-hmm.
And, I always tell people, for me, I think when my dad heard the diagnosis, because when we caught it, it was stage 4. And so for him, I think when he heard that diagnosis, as much as he said he wanted to fight, I just don't think I don't think he shook that off him. And I think that hindered a little
Him
bit of
knowing
the
that it
fight.
was stage 4, like he
Yeah.
couldn't shake getting past that, basically.
Yeah, and I think even though like he was trying to fight, I think in his mind, like, because there was one point specifically, we were in his hospital room, and he said something, and he was like, "Oh, so I'm dying," and I'm like, "Dad, what are you talking about?" Even though that's
Mm-hmm.
essentially what the doctor had said, like I'm trying to and I just don't think he could shake that, and so it gives you a sense of hope, okay, we're doing good, the tumor's removed, like all of this stuff, but then it just gets snatched from you really quickly. When it's like, oh, well, she had a stroke and this happened and spread over the body. And it's like, huh?
Right. Damn,
So,
what the fuck,
right.
doc?
Right. It's just like, what are you talking about? So it gives you a sense of hope, but like it hurts a lot because the hope was snatched so quickly from
Yeah.
you. It was snatched really quickly from you. And I'm not saying that my dad didn't have hope, but it just happened so quick. And like I said, because I was with him every day, like taking him to doctor's appointment, doing all this stuff, I just didn't see the same amount of hope and fight in him
Mm-hmm.
that my mom had, because I think he just could not shake that. And I also think he was also tired. And also a part of me is like, I feel like he wanted to go be with his wife.
Yeah. I
That's
mean,
how I felt.
and I can see how you feel that way, and also I can think, obviously I'm never trying to speak for your father or anything, but I think probably going through that process with your mom and seeing that, and then it's like, damn, my turn. You know what I'm saying? Some shit like
Right.
that, for lack of better
Right.
words. But
Right.
like I can see that, and then I know like people that don't know, stage 4 cancer is like crazy. That's like
It is. It's
you know what I
wild.
mean. So I can definitely understand you sitting in the office and the doctor telling you got stage 4, and they want you to be all peachy fuzzy, but it's like, no, nigga, this is like, nigga, I don't
Right.
feel peachy
And we're
about
trying
this.
to move as quick as we can, but he had kidney issues. So like there's
Yeah.
different stuff. Like we had to get his levels right. So all of that stuff on top of that, right? Because he had to get a kidney transplant in 2019. So like, then here you come.
Right.
I'm sorry,
Damn.
in 2018, he got a kidney transplant, 2017. And then in 2019, then you have cancer, right? So like that's a whole nother. So like you can't do normal things that you would typically do
Right.
if you did have, you can't do normal chemo. Like we can't move as fast to get the port and stuff like that because we're gonna make sure his levels are right, right? So it was like all of these different things that it was just different. It was just a different process.
Wow. Wow. Before I even move on, I want to say rest in peace.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, to both your parents, rest in peace. I do send my prayers and condolences to you and your family, anyone who knew them personally, who they impacted in a positive way. Because that shit sucks, man. I tell people all the time, if you're gonna die, let it be something tragic. You know what I mean? Don't let it be some stupid shit. You know what I mean? That's in reference to like, that's in reference to like, you know what I'm saying? People I know in the streets, people I know that's doing some stupid shit. It's like, what the fuck did you think was gonna happen? But when you see people pass away from cancer, you see people pass away from, car accidents and things of that nature, home invasion, shit like that. Anything that's out of their own doing, it's truly is sad. And you think about the impact it leaves on the people around them, knowing that, like, what the fuck just happened? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It leaves everyone in that state of shock. So I just want to say rest in peace once again to your parents, and I send my personal dose to you and your family, in all
Thank
honesty.
you. Thank you.
Um,
I appreciate it.
oh, no problem at all. No problem at all. I mean, going through those processes, you know what I mean? Um, you were hinting at how strong, well, not strong, but like how many people was coming to the hospital to support.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it made me think about the importance of identifying your support system because uh, in my personal life, in my personal being, I can honestly say that I spent a large amount of my time on this earth not really appreciating my support system. I think a lot of times people take it for granted. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Until you get into a fucked up situation. You know what I'm saying? Like when I'm really down bad, I know my mama got me. You know what I'm saying? But it's like growing up, you truly don't. always give them the flowers or give them the credit that they actually deserve for doing that. Yeah, your mom or your parents, they're supposed to do that. But a lot of them don't. You know what I mean? I know
Yeah.
people who got parents who don't even have a good relationship. They don't even talk and things of that nature. So I want to talk about the importance of identifying your support system because I know what it does for me when I'm going through hard times. I know who I can depend on. It's not that many people, but their love and everything they do for me is so strong that I don't need nobody. It's us against the world. So I want to ask you, but let's talk about the importance of identifying your support system and how did that impact you going through this situation?
Yeah, but I think to your point though, it doesn't. So people assume like a support system has to be all of these people.
Right.
I'm sure you've heard before, like you only have what do they say, like three confidants in your life, and then all these other layers. I don't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily subscribe to that because to me, I have you never know how people are going to show up for you until something happens. And I'm not saying it's something traumatic, like
Mm-hmm.
you lose somebody or something like that. It could be as simple as like, I just need to have a conversation with a friend who I know can get me right. Right.
Yeah.
So I think just understanding in your support system who you can go to for what. So for my dad specifically, um, God, like I talked about it, like my friends showed up. So I had like literally like 5 or 6 text chains between family, friends, like letting them know everything that was going on with my dad because people were texting his phone and he wasn't responding. So, like all of these things are happening. So when he passed, I'm sending it out to like all the text threads.
Yeah.
And one of my friends, I said it in the podcast, literally, I'm trying to go to the bank. Like now all these people are coming to the hospital. And I'm just like, okay. Like he's passed away at this point. So I'm like, okay. But at that point, like one of my closest friends, she literally, like, I don't even know where she came from. And I was just like, where did you come from? And her hair was wet. She was in the salon chair and she got the text message and she was like, I have to go. And she just got up out of the salon chair and came to the hospital and was like, you're not about to know. And then one of my other friends was at work and she worked far, at the time. And she's like, I just got the text message and left work. Like I didn't say anything to my boss. Like I just left. Right. One of my
Mm-hmm.
friends was living in Virginia still living in Virginia. And her husband was like, do you need to go down there today? Like her husband was like, I will, like, you can go down there today. Right. Like, but they apparently, I didn't even know they had a text message thread and we're like, who's with Loryn right now? And if somebody had to
Right.
leave, somebody else would come. They were like, who's with Loryn right now? Hey, I'm going
Right.
to get food. What are you going to get her? Like it was like crazy, right?
That's so
Um,
dope. That's
yeah,
so
it
dope.
was it
That's
was
so dope.
like every time, look, I'm getting emotional. Every time I think about that, like just the way they showed up, like their parents, like my friend's mom came and cleaned up the whole upstairs. My other friend's mom brought food, like it's just I think here's a big thing, Hatch. People always talk about, well, I don't have that big support system. The reason why I have support systems like that is because the way that I show up and the way that
Mm,
I support my friends. And
talk
so a
about
lot
it.
of times, you know what I'm saying? Like a lot of
Yeah.
times people are like, well, I don't really rock with people like that, or I only got a few people whoop the wop. And it's like, well, how do you show up for people? How do
Right.
you support people when they need it? And I'm not talking about, again, just a traumatic situation. If they need, if they just want to talk, if they just want to hang out, if they just, you just call and check in and do a mental health check with them. How often are you doing that, right? Like I do
Yeah.
that with my friend. If I haven't talked to my friends in like 2 weeks, I will literally be like, hey, I'm just doing a mental health check.
Mm,
Literally out of the blue, I text them, I'll call them, whatever it is. I'm like, I'm just doing a mental health check. That's it, right? And so, like, I think that's really important is when you're identifying your support system, look at yourself and how you show up. The reason
yeah.
my friends showed up for me like that because the way I show up for them. Like at the end of the day, like I know I'm a good friend. And I'm not even
Yeah.
trying to say that in like a pretentious way. It's just I know the type of person that I am and how I show up for them in
Hmm.
ways like, because none of them have lost their parents and been through that, right? But I show up for them in different ways that they need. And so I
Yeah.
think that's the biggest thing is when you are identifying your support system, look at yourself and how you show up and how you would want people to show up for you. Show up in that way for them. And
Yeah.
that's how you're going to get people to show. And sometimes people will not show up in the same way. So I want to be very clear on that too, because there are some times when you're like, I had to recognize that people aren't going to do the same way that you do, and they're not going to act the same way you act, but they're going to show up in ways that you didn't even know you needed them to show up,
Hmm.
right? And you have to remember that too. And so I would definitely say again, like just understanding, like if you want a support system, show up for them how you want them to show up for you. And then even in your support system, kind of recognize who's going to be what for what situation. Like I know there's certain friends who I can call and have conversations with about everything. And then I know there's certain friends who I can call and have conversations with about certain things, because certain things I'm like, you're not going to get it, right? Like I can
Right.
have conversations with my friends, certain friends about entrepreneurship. And the other friends are like, girl, like you just need to go get a job, right? You know what I
Right.
mean? But like understanding that, and that's okay too. And so I would say that's the biggest thing is when you are identifying that. And if you feel like, well, I don't have that support system, Loryn, well, how do you show up for people? And then that will show you how people are going to show up for you.
Right. Because that energy will be reciprocated one way or another.
Right.
But damn it, Loryn, I need you in my life. I need people to just hit me up and say, "Yo, how you doing?"
That's it.
When I get hit up, it's sexual favors involved, and I just be feeling used.
Hatch.
I just feel used and abused.
Hatch, do you mental health check people randomly? Or do you just do it on this podcast?
Hey, you calling me up? No, I'm just playing.
Yeah, right. You see how this turned to my podcast interview now, Hatch.
No, man. In all seriousness, I do come on this podcast all the time, and I do disclose to the friends of the show that how you were so open about how you know you're a good friend. I always say I don't think I'm a good friend, good son, good big brother, and things of that nature. Those people would tell you otherwise, but I have my views on, so my views about myself and things I know I need to work on. So in all honesty, no, I don't. But I also will say I don't have that many friends, to be honest with you. I chose that route just because people have their guard up and things of that nature. And I moved to Arizona after high school. And I tell people all the time, you pretty much meet all your friends in like grade school and all that good stuff. And I moved to a whole nother city, another state. I just got straight to grown man shit. You know what I'm saying? Working and, you know what I'm saying, doing all that. So I meet people along the way, but I never truly, bring them all the way in. But I do have, one friend particularly who I grew up with since, second, third grade. We talk almost every day. You know what I mean? So, and I do ask him how he's doing and things of that nature in different words, of course, but it always comes out that we checking in on each other and things of that nature. So I guess to one person, I am a good friend.
So why don't you think you're like a good friend, brother, et cetera, et cetera?
Just because I'm very to myself. You know what I mean?
What does that have to do with being a good friend, though?
I'm isolated. I'm just very isolated. I'm selfish to the umpteenth degree. You know what I mean? And it's not something that I do on purpose. It's just I go through so much internally that I'm always just focused on how to overcome some shit. And honestly, time just goes by. Like, honestly, I tell people all the time, like, damn, I thought I just talked to you like last week. Nah, nigga, it was 3 months ago. I'm like, oh shit, my bad. Nigga, like, my fault. But I be literally just focused on, I be on tunnel vision. I be focused on just trying to better myself so much that a lot of times I really don't take into account how other people are feeling about not reaching out to them and things of that nature. And really, it's more of on a family level. You know what I'm saying? For the longest amount of time, my mom, she didn't think I liked her or some shit like that. It's because I didn't talk to her how she thought I should have, which I should have done more. But it's just literally because I was so focused on trying to learn how to become a man and things of that nature.
Right.
I was just in this space where I need to figure this shit out because I felt myself slowly but surely going down the wrong path. So I just got locked in on some, maniac crazy shit. That's why it's probably called the thin line between genius and insanity. Because I literally just locked in trying to better myself.
But does that make you a bad son for trying to better yourself?
No, and let them tell it I'm not a bad son.
Right. So right. So that's why I'm like, I think we need to change your language. Look, see, we about to have you see what's happening here? Like, I need you to change your language. Just because you're working on yourself and trying to better yourself so you can better know how to talk to your mom, so you can better know how to talk to your friends. Because again, you lost your dad at a young age, right? Yeah. Like you're trying to learn this how to be a man because you can't learn that from a woman. It just is what it is. And I always tell single moms that, like, I love, but you can't learn how to be a man from a woman all the time, right? Yeah. So like that doesn't make you a bad person. That doesn't make you a bad friend, son. It just means that I haven't learned how to properly balance and manage the two. That's all that comes down to. So I don't want you to think or say that you're a bad brother, bad son, bad friend. I just have not properly learned how to manage the two. And so right now it seems like I'm isolating because I don't know how to, I don't want to feel like I'm putting that on you. I want to feel like I'm doing this, right? You just don't know how to properly manage the two. That's all, and balance them. That doesn't make you a bad friend, son, brother, any of that. So I want you to like never say that again.
I'll make that promise. I'll make that promise.
Okay, look, y'all hear it on this podcast. You see, I just had to give him a little therapy session. Stop saying that. Okay, you're just not properly equipped right now. You don't have the proper tools right now to learn how to balance and manage the two, which you'll learn, and that's okay. But you're not any of that stuff.
And I'm definitely getting better. I'm definitely, progressing in those areas. I made some changes to my life recently, so I definitely seen the benefits of that. You know what I mean?
Good.
So I definitely understand. I appreciate everything you just said as well, because sometimes people just need to hear that. You know what I mean? I can say shit to myself all day in my head,
and it doesn't resonate. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? So to hear you say that, to have this on wax, so I can always come back to it, of course, it's very beneficial. I will say that. Which leads perfectly.
Look at the segue.
Perfectly into our next topic. I want to talk about the benefits of allowing yourself to feel. Kind of piggybacking off what I was just mentioning about, my personal life. For the longest amount of time, I really wasn't allowing myself to feel any, real emotions. And recently, I stopped smoking and never was a huge drinker. I stopped smoking. I kind of changed my life, working out a lot more, trying to be more, positively balanced in my life. And a lot of my emotions and things were starting to hit me like a fucking Mack truck. You know what I'm saying? A lot of things I wasn't dealing with. And I realized that when I was smoking, you know what I mean? Weed, of course. I ain't smoking crack, Loryn. Jesus Christ. I ain't on the meth.
Not even no meth. Oh,
but when I was smoking, I realized that I wasn't trying to defeat my demons. I was running away from my demons. You know what I mean? Like a lot of times when I was smoking, it just put me in a mindset where I'm cool, I'm chilling. I'm already a chill, laid back person, but I was going all the way down. You know what I'm saying? Just getting away from the bullshit. That was my escape. And when I stopped smoking, I realized, I still got the same fucking problems that I had 6, 7 years ago. Yeah, maybe I can masquerade a little bit different.
Right.
But the point, the goal is to beat them fucking demons, not to have them motherfuckers in my back pocket everywhere I go. So I want to talk about the benefits of allowing yourself to feel, because I don't think a lot of people, millennials, is like you and I. Well, damn, am I a millennial? Didn't they change our shit?
I don't know. They change it every week. Who knows?
They try to tell me I wasn't a Leo no more after I was already like 22. Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
It's bizarre.
But I think a lot of people in our age group, let's just say that, we struggle because our older generations didn't really allow themselves to feel as much. We're more open to it now, but we still have a lot of people that struggle with it. Like I go to therapy and things with those nature and all that good shit. But I want to talk about the benefits of allowing yourself to feel and how that can help you positively.
Yeah. So, I think to your point, therapy, if you are listening to this, do not go to therapy. That is a major key to life. Okay. You don't have to be going through something to go to therapy. You don't have to be in a bad situation. Like you could be like, no, I'm good, and still go to therapy. Okay. Therapy is the cheat code to life, I promise you. But
Ding ding ding.
right. So the benefits of allowing yourself to feel. So like, when people are like, what do you mean to allow yourself to feel? Because what happens is there's two different things that can happen in your life. So you can cope with something and you can manage something. So we'll speak about grief specifically. So coping with grief looks like smoking, drinking, sex, whatever your vice is, right? Like that.
You know me like that? Jesus Christ.
Right, like, how does she know? Whatever your vice is, that's a coping mechanism. So a coping mechanism, all that does is suppress the feeling that you're having. Like you said, you're not defeating your demons. You're just kind of putting them to the side for a little bit because I don't feel like dealing with them, right? So this other vice is going to get me away from whatever this feeling is that I don't like. Like, I don't like that I'm feeling sad. I don't like that I'm feeling anxious. I don't like that I'm feeling mad. I don't like that I'm feeling happy because then it turns into guilt, right?
Yeah.
And so what happens when you manage it, and Dr. Kurt, he was on my podcast. He's amazing. He was talking about this. When you manage that and when you allow yourself to feel, So for example, if you start feeling sad or anxious or mad, right? You know that that's coming because at a certain point you start having more self-awareness, and this is something you learn. So don't like get hard on yourself if you're like, well, I didn't know. That's okay.
Yeah.
Like you're going to start recognizing that, oh, how I'm feeling right now is like something triggered me. I don't know what it was, and you may not know what it is in the moment, but something triggered me, so now I'm feeling sad. So instead of me going like my vice, and it was binge eating, right? Like instead of me going to binge eat, I'm going to allow that sadness to come in, and I'm just going to let it be there. And if I have to sit there and be sad for an hour, then I'm going to sit there and be sad for an hour. If I sit there and cry uncontrollably for 10 minutes and like I really don't know why that is, then I'm going to sit there and cry uncontrollably for 10 minutes. And then when I feel just good enough, I don't have to feel at the top of the tip top. I don't have to do any of that. When I feel just good enough, I like check in with myself. I'm like, hey, you good? You all right? Are we able to move forward in the day? And if I'm like, yep, we're able to move forward, and no, I need a little bit more time, like I listen to myself and decide what that is, right? But that's
Yeah.
because I allow myself to feel what that is. So I would say the benefit of feeling is allowing yourself to fully be able to move forward. Because if you just cope with it or you don't allow yourself to feel that because you don't like, because it's an icky feeling, right?
Hmm.
Then I don't feel that you're going to be able to move forward. And I'm very careful about saying move forward to move on, because you don't move on from like grief specifically, because it's a lifelong journey. It just is what it is, right?
Hmm.
But like to be able to move forward, you have to feel. And if
Yeah.
you don't feel, you're not going to be able to move forward. In your mind, you might be like, oh, yeah, like I just smoked. I ain't worried about it. But like you said, you never defeated those demons because all you did was push them to the side today. Cool. And then they came back. You push them to this side today. And they came back. You push them to this side. Instead of allowing yourself to feel those mother suckers, right? And allow them to
Mother
come in.
sucker.
You know what I'm saying? Allow them to come in and do whatever they want to do, right? And so then you're able to move forward because now you're like, oh, here they come again. I know what this feels like. Okay, all right, come on with your funky tail. Like I always tell, come on, Bree, with your funky tail self. Come on, because I was minding my business. I'm washing, like I'm minding my business. Why are you here? But I'm
Right.
come on with your funky tail self. I'm gonna let you do your thing, and then I'm gonna move forward, right?
Mhm.
Because
Yeah.
if not, like if you don't allow yourself to feel, you're never gonna be able to move forward. Like you're just not gonna be able to do it because you're always going to be running from something, and one day it's gonna catch you. It's
Mm.
gonna catch you. So until you decide to let it come in and catch you one time, and then from that point forward, it's no longer chasing you, you're not like that is the benefit is stop is you're gonna have the chance to stop running from something that you know is always going to chase you, and to
Yeah.
allow it to, you're playing tag, to let it tag you as opposed to catch you. Because when you're playing tag, they just touch you and then they move forward, right? When something catches
Mhm.
you, you're bound
Gotcha.
by it.
Right. Yeah,
You know what I'm
gotcha.
saying?
Mm. Yeah. Nice. Look, man, I like I said, if you would have talked to me about this, say a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, I wouldn't have really understood what you were saying. I'm like, fuck you talking about, Loryn? I'm good. Like I go through my shit, but no, I'm that nigga. I'll get through it. And I do, you know what I'm saying? But now that I can honestly say that I've reached a point in my life to where I'm allowing myself to feel, I totally understand what you're saying. It's because there were so many things like I was dealing with that I don't want to say I got rid of it so quickly because I actually faced them head on,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm further along in that process than I ever was. You know what I'm saying? So I definitely understand what you're saying. People, all friends of the show, allow yourself to feel. I know a lot of, what I'm saying, my fellas, we don't want to be sensitive and things of that nature. I just said last week's episode, I believe men are more sensitive than women. We just have a good way of hiding it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
um, so all friends of the show, man, women, male, have a 30% women rate. Allow yourself to feel. It's okay. Get through your
It's
shit.
okay.
Stop holding on to the same baggage and shit you was dealing with when you was 16, 17, 18.
Stop
Just
running. It's exhausting. You're gonna get exhausted.
you
That's the
start
thing.
aging
You're
your
gonna get
face.
exhausted.
Like,
Yeah,
like,
you're gonna get so tired from running from those feelings that you don't want to feel. You're going to get exhausted very quickly. And that's when sicknesses come. That's when mental health issues come. That's when all that stuff comes when you don't allow it to process. You're going to get tired. You're going to get
Hmm.
tired of running eventually. So you might as well get tired earlier instead of like you having some type of health scare later.
Right.
So
Just tap out the race willingly. Not don't be forced to tap out
that's
the
it.
motherfucking race.
That's it.
Um, so I want to move on because we kind of hinted at it in many different ways on this podcast. But like I said, your podcast really breaks down all the layers of grief on all topics.
Hmm.
So I want to talk about the many layers of grief. You know what I'm saying? And we've done it so far. We're 55 minutes to this episode. We've done it so far. You gave so much advice already to those struggling with grief. But I want to ask in a more direct way. So for the people who didn't really, you know what I mean, catch on to it with all the things we're talking about, I want to make sure they get it directly. So I want to talk about the many layers of grief, if we can, and also the second part, which we'll get to, is the advice portion of it. So first, let's just talk about the many layers of grief, if we can.
Yeah. So I think there's two ways you can look at it, right? So you can look at it from the emotional aspect and then what grief really is, right? And so, when I say the many layers of grief, from a just looking at it standpoint, we talked about it earlier, not just losing someone. Obviously, we know there's a grief that comes with the loss of a human being, right?
Yeah,
But again, whether you lose a job, identity crisis, being black in America, being black anywhere, honestly,
they hate us
moving.
everywhere.
Right, right. Like even the grief associated with you, moving to a whole nother state as an adult. Same with me. I moved to a whole nother state as an adult twice, three
Mm,
times really, right? Like the grief that's associated with that people don't talk about, the grief of getting a new job, the grief of losing a pet, the grief of a friendship breakup,
mm-hmm.
right? Like all of these different things. So there's that aspect of like we don't have to just associate grief with death because that's just one layer of it, right? There's so many other parts of life that bring grief into our life that we don't acknowledge, and we wonder why we have these like weird feelings, or we kind of move in life the way we move, right?
Yeah.
And then as far as like emotionally, the layers with that, we obviously, it depends on the day. Like some people say 5 stages, some people say 7 stages, right, of grief that happen. The sadness, the anger, the denial, the acceptance, all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
All of those many layers. But like, why? So when I say talk about the many layers, why are we so focused on the ones that are going to keep us in grief? Why are we not focused on the ones that are going to take us out of that heavy part of grief? Because
Mm-hmm.
again, grief is a lifelong journey. It doesn't matter what the grief was, it doesn't matter what the loss is, right? But why are we not focusing on the layers and the levels that are going to take us to be able to move forward in life, not move on? Because you don't move on from a loss. You don't. And I want people to stop saying that, because you don't move on from a loss, you move forward in the loss,
Yeah.
right? Because what happens is, people are like, oh, I just want to get back to normal, or, this person should just get back to normal because they've been grieving too long. First of all, there's no time limit for grief. So, like,
Right.
let's go ahead and put that over here to the side in the trash and never
Right.
bring that out again.
Put that in
And,
the please shut the fuck up folder.
like, respectfully, please, like, get out
Or
of my face with
disrespectfully.
that.
However I'm feeling that day.
Right, like please move, like get out of my face with that crap. But then, on the second regard, like stop saying someone's going to move on, because grief is going to be there regardless, because grief teaches you lessons. And I always tell people, they're like, when am I going to stop grieving? I'm like, you're never going to stop grieving, you're going to learn to adjust to it.
Mm,
That's what it comes down to. So like I just learned, just like you learned, to adjust without having our parents or a
yeah.
parent, right? You learn to adjust without having that, spouse. If you go through a divorce, you learn to adjust without having that job. You learn to adjust to being black in America and the things that we go through. You learn to adjust to these things, right? And when people are like, oh, get back to this, to your normal is no longer the same, because that's the beauty. And people are like, probably like, excuse you, that's the beauty about grief, is that you no longer are in that space of normal, so you get to create what that new normal is. right? Because your new, like, that normal is no longer over here because there was something in there that's now lost in that normal. So now you automatically get a new normal and you get to decide how you want to create that. I always tell people grief is the only time that anything can happen. You can be at any age and you can literally recreate who you are. And I talk about this on one of the episodes. It's like recreating your identity and nobody's going to check you for it. Because you could be 55 and lose somebody and become a whole new person. They'll be like, well, they lost their whatever.
They
So
totally
like,
understand at that point in time.
right. So like nobody's going to check you for it because now you have this loss associated with now who this new person is. And so now you get to decide how you want to move forward. So maybe you was doing some stuff in your past life. Like you said, maybe you was out in the streets, maybe you lost a homie, right? And you're like, yo, I don't want to do that anymore. And so now you get to like create this new life. And maybe some people might be like, oh, well, whatever. But like you get to decide that and decide if you want to be more positive, if you want to live a more fulfilled life, if you want to move in a different career trajectory, whatever it is, right? So like that is the thing, is like, why are we so focused on the negative and the sadness and the because yes, grief is going to be all those things, the depression, the anxiety. Grief is all of those things that are going to happen, but why are we not focusing on, like, I get to literally be a new person. I can literally move forward and let these lessons in life, like, help me, right? So like there's an analogy that I use. So if you think about an arrow, right? So you know how an arrow, the function works, right? Like you pull an arrow back, it shoots forward, it hits the target, right?
Yeah.
So like think about like your life is this arrow. So you're pulling back, like, but all of these lessons, all of this grief, all of this depression, all of this anxiety, all of this loss, right? All of that stuff is literally propelling you forward to hit your target, your goal, your whatever it is that you want to be, this new normal in life. But you literally could not have gotten there without pulling back and moving that forward. You have to use all this stuff, all this grief, all this loss to literally propel you forward to get you to that next point in life that you want to be. And so, like, let's focus on that and not hold so much weight on that negativity. Like, hold weight in it in a sense of like, this is going to move me forward, but don't hold it in a sense of this is who I have to be and this is where I'm going to be and this is like who I am because like this loss. No, I get to decide who Loryn Denise wants to be without her parents. Hatch gets to decide who he wants to be without his dad, right? You get to decide, whoever's listening, who you want to be without the loss. Grief does not have to define you. You get to define yourself inside of the grief.
Don DeMarco, Jesus Christ. That was flawless. That was flawless. Jesus Christ.
I'm sorry, I get passionate about grief, as you can tell.
No, look, I love it, and that's why I want to bring you on, because what you're saying, it's obvious that you're passionate about what you're talking about, and it's not some bullshit. Like, people be loud about some bullshit. You
Right,
like, bro,
right.
you don't shut the fuck up. But like when you saying what you're saying, and it's absolutely correct, no matter at what point of view you look at it from, and it's nothing but helpful if you just take the shit in. It's even heightened to another level when you see you that passionate about it, because it's like, okay, hold on, let me dive in a little bit more. Let me tap in a little bit more.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So it hits hard. It truly fucking hits hard, and I don't think I could have put that in any other better words for the listeners. That's why I really wanted you on this platform, because it's not just for them. I'm like this hour. I'm learning right now. Like, I'm really learning, because these are all things that I deal with. You know what I mean? Like, so I've been following you for a little minute now. Like I said, my IG is new, 2022 edition type shit.
Right.
But I followed you, and I've been wanting to have this conversation, but I was waiting until I knew I was ready to actually take it in. You know what I'm saying? I don't want a pointless ass conversation, and I'm just doing it for this. I don't never just do that. I want to make sure I was ready to take this in. So I'm really just hanging on to damn near every word you're saying right now, because it's really helping me right now in the present moment. So I know it's going to help everyone that's tapping in and join this conversation. You know what I'm saying? We touched on the we touched on it a few different ways on this episode, but recently you just talked about in that last segment about the sadness. People always hang up on the sadness and the death and things of that nature. And we talked about it earlier, so with both our parents and things of that nature. Well, both your parents and my dad passing away. And how I talked about how I had those thought processes about my mom. And you mentioned when you were going through that situation with your father, that you had to put yourself think about those things for, to get through that process. So I want to talk about let's normalizing death.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of people have a negative, connotation about it, understandably so. But there is, for lack of I don't want to say positive things, but there are, I guess I will say positive things. Fuck it, it's my podcast.
Okay.
There are positive things you can take from the idea of preparing for death. You know what I mean? I know I listened to I listened to your podcast episodes, and fuck, what was the one I was talking about? Oh, when
Estate
you
planning.
Yeah, and your father when he wanted the blue. You talked about how your father
Yeah, the
wanted
blue
the
casket.
blue casket, play with
Shiny blue
someone.
casket. Yep.
You know what I mean? But you guys plan for that. A
Right.
lot of people shy away from those conversations
Mm-hmm.
because they don't even want to think about shit like that happening. Although you guys were kind of thrust into that position, but you still had those conversations, and positive came from because he went out, quote unquote, the way he wanted to go out.
Right.
You know,
Right.
you guys were able to celebrate his life the way it was more intimate. You know what I mean? So I want to talk about normalizing death and the conversations around that, and trying to spin it in a somewhat positive way if we can.
Yeah. Normalizing death. That's funny because people are like, what?
Right. Say what?
Yes. No. But I think why we need to normalize it is because it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen to
Mhm.
all of us. It's gonna happen around us. If COVID didn't teach us anything, like it's happening. Whether
Yeah.
we're choosing to acknowledge it or not, just like I always say with grief, like whether you choose to acknowledge it or not, it's gonna happen. Just like
Mhm.
with death, whether you choose to acknowledge it or not, it's gonna happen. Especially like, obviously we lost our parents when we were younger, right? But like
Yeah.
as our parents are aging, like people just aren't living as long anymore, because the different food, and we can go to a whole nother situation with that. But people just aren't living as long anymore, right? And so like we have to, people are like, well, why do we have to normalize it? It's not even about like the normalization of it. It's just at the end of the day, like it's something that's going to happen. So I
Yeah.
think maybe the better wording that we can use is acknowledging that it's going to happen. And I'll say, especially for us in the Black community, I don't know why we're so afraid to acknowledge that it's going to happen, but it's going to happen. And so, having those conversations, like I have a full episode about estate planning and how important it is because with my mom, my dad was alive. So he kind of handled a lot of that stuff. But with my
Mhm.
dad, he didn't have a will. He didn't have like a living trust. Like he didn't have all of that stuff. Luckily, my siblings and I were all on the same page on how we wanted to do things. But that's like a rare case. Like talking to estate lawyers, they're like, that is rare that five of y'all got on the same page about everything.
Yeah.
Literally. But going to that probate process, we went to probate court. So I became, I think, the administrator of the state maybe 6 months after my dad passed. And we were in probate for a year and a half, meaning creditors could come and ask for their money from the estate. Like we had to sell the house, but I was like on the, like all of this crazy stuff, right?
Mhm.
So, having those conversations ahead of time will alleviate or ease, let me not say alleviate, will ease some of that grief that you're going to have. Because at the end of the day, you're going to be grieving regardless, right? But having those conversations and knowing the route that you need to go is going to make it a little bit easier. Because I read something, Hatch, that said from the time that someone dies, someone, whoever that person is, someone's will make 100, at least 150 decisions within the first 24 hours of them dying, right? So imagine on top of all these decisions, you don't know how you're going to bury them. You don't know if they have life insurance. You don't know where the life insurance is. You don't know how they want their funeral to be. And then you add people's opinions because everybody got an opinion every time somebody
Everybody
dies.
got something to say.
Everybody got an opinion every time somebody died of how something should be, how the funeral should be, how the house should be sold, how quick you should get rid of their stuff, how you should, like my dad's stuff is still in storage and he died in 2019. Okay. Right. Like, so, but people are like, you got to get rid of it fast. Like, just all of those things. Right. So, we have to acknowledge the fact that it's going to happen and that a way to kind of ease a little bit of the grief, whether it's you or whether it's somebody else. So like if it's you, right? Like how can I ease some of the responsibility that's going to fall on my family when I die?
Mhm.
I think that's what we have to, and that's a very selfless thing to think about. So I think you got to check in with yourself. Am I selfish or am I selfless? And I'm not saying that you're selfish if you don't have your will and stuff in place. What I'm saying is it's way more selfless to be thinking about your family, to be thinking about whoever that responsibility is going to fall on by having your will in place, having your living trust in place, having a plan, and basically having your estate plan in place, right? Having enough life insurance and it written out how it's going to be split. If you have younger children, we just talked about this in my past episode. If you have younger children and you have life insurance and they don't reach a certain age, how is it going to be paid out? Do they have to be 18? Do they have to, if you watch Power, he has all this money, but he can't do it until he graduates college. Of course, there's all types of other mess, but like,
he ain't never gonna finish college, by the way.
Okay, because Tariq is ridiculous. But like, you have to think about all of these things, right? So like, I think number one, it comes with acknowledging that it's gonna happen. And I had this conversation with my friend. By you acknowledging that doesn't mean you're gonna die tomorrow.
Right. People believe in like you speaking into existence.
Right.
That's one thing that's going to happen, brother.
That's right. That's not true. Like, I'm all about manifesting things, but acknowledging something and manifesting something are two different things. And I think that's where we have disconnect. And it's, again, to your point of like, oh, when you speak it, it's going to happen. You're not saying like, yeah, you know what I'm saying? I'm going to die soon. No, you're just saying like, I acknowledge that like, I'm going to die one day. I acknowledge that mom and dad, you're going to die one day. And I want to make sure that, yes, I'm going to grieve, but I want to make sure that whoever is responsible for my estate, a little bit of their pain is eased, because it's still going to be there, because they didn't have to worry about how they were going to bury me. They didn't have to worry about where I was going to get buried. They didn't have to worry about if they're going to be able to pay off my debt, if I have debt, when I pass away, right? Like, they're not going to have to worry about that. And mom and dad, because again, like, our parents are getting older. And so now we have to sit down and have conversations with mom and dad and say, listen, like, I know one day you're going to pass. And I just want to make sure that when that happens, that this is kind of almost like a selfish place where it's kind of okay. Of like, I just want to make sure that, number one, you all are set up and that we're set up or I'm set up, so that when that does happen, that I'm not worried about if I have to sell fish plates on Saturday to bury you, or I have to do a GoFundMe to bury you, or like, if Aunt Sharon comes in and says, I think she will want this, that you wrote down, no, I want a shiny blue casket. I want flashlight. Like, this is my dad. Like, I want flashlight plant. Like, these are things that he knew. So somebody tried to come and check us. It's like, well, actually, this is what he said.
Right.
And so for those also like me, who is someone who I am I'm very organized and I like to run things a certain way. It's almost like having a little bit of control from the grave. Right? Because I'm working with this partner with this company called Farewelling, and they do this thing called Farewelling 5, which I would suggest, if you all follow me, you'll see it soon. Like, talk about the top 5 things that you would want after your death. And so, like, for me, I said, like, I want y'all at the repast, I want y'all to have a DJ. I want y'all to have champagne everywhere. I want y'all to have wine everywhere. Like, I want y'all to have that. Like, cool, I know you're going to be sad. Like, that's fine. Like, I'm not saying but like, I need y'all to be like, you know what, if Loryn was here, she'd do this, right?
Right. Yeah.
Like, so it gives you that little bit of still having that control after you're gone, right? And so for some people, that's like, well, shoot, all right then, because some of y'all are type A and y'all need that. Right.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that's where that selflessness. So that's that selfishness. So you can like operate on that, and that's okay too. Or that selflessness of, how can I make sure that when I'm gone, these people, whoever the responsibility on this, doesn't have to worry about it. And mom and dad, how can you guys worry about, like, how can you all help ease our grief when it happens? So I think acknowledging it we just have to do it. And you acknowledging it, and I'm going to say it again, I'll probably say it. You acknowledging death does not mean you're manifesting death. So please stop believing that, because that's not true. It's just not true.
Please stop, guys.
Please. It's not true. Not true.
Real fast, I want to ask you, how are we on time? I know we had a window. I know we can start a little bit
Oh,
late.
I'm
How
good.
old
I clear out my day. I just got content to make, so I'm good.
Okay, cool. Because I didn't know if I want to, shorten up a couple of these questions. These are very good
No,
ones.
listen, it's your world. I'm in it. I want to make sure I'm bringing value to your audience.
Oh shit, you just don't know how much value you've brought already. um, I want to talk about something that you mentioned on your podcast, and I listened to one of those episodes, and you were talking about the grief of sex,
Mm-hmm.
and you mentioned that you learned a lot about sex through pop culture,
Mm-hmm.
and it made me. I was in the gym. Pause. I was like, "Yo, what the fuck, yo?"
She know me?
Yeah, I'm like, "Damn, what the fuck? Is she around this motherfucker?" Like, because I can honestly say I've learned a lot about my life through pop culture, and I kind of mix in sports with that because Kobe Bryant, 50 Cent, Floyd Mayweather, these dudes kind of raised me by looking at the way they operate in life. And I learned about a lot about sex through music and pop culture. I learned a lot about fucking how to be a man through pop culture because, like I said, my father died at a young age. So I was one of those kids who I didn't watch a lot of cartoons after a certain age. I was more live action, looking for figures on the screen that I thought was, I thought highly of, and I wanted to reach that level. So I want to ask you um, directly, how much have you learned from pop culture?
Mm-hmm. You talking about in general in life or sex?
Yeah, general in life. General in life, because if we just talk about sex, I'll just pull up a 3 6 Mafia catalog on you. I'll be like, yeah. So I'm supposed to lay on the bed, right? While she, like, that's what I learned. So
Hilarious.
let's just say in life.
That's hilarious. I've learned a lot. I think we've all learned a lot, right? Because that's just how we grew up. And depending on how you grew up, like I grew up, it wasn't like a super religious household, but um, my dad will always say, my dad grew up in the hood. My mom kind of grew up in the hood too. She just kind of left a little earlier, but my dad was like, "Oh, y'all are so sheltered." Like he would always say that. And I'm like, "Well, this is your fault," because he was like, "I don't want you to grow up how I grew up." So it's, I
Right.
always think about that. Like parents, it's like, where do you balance? I heard Steve Harvey, he was talking about like, how do you balance like giving, like not wanting your kids to grow up how you grew up, but also like giving them the world at the same time. So, um, I would say I just learned a lot. I learned a lot from my parents, but obviously I lost my mom when I was 27, and then I lost my dad when I was 31. And so in that age, I felt like was a pivotal time for me coming into my womanhood
Hmm.
and understanding like where I wanted to go from there. Like that transition from like 20s to 30s is like a really interesting transition in your life. And so I learned a lot during that time. Luckily I had like aunts and my godmother and stuff like that. But you we're just in a world of social media, and you see all types of stuff. Like you see all these girls with different bodies, and you see, oh, divine feminine energy, and this is how you have to act, and all of these
Hmm.
different toxic masculinity. Like you learn all of these things, and you see all these things, and you're like, okay, well, this is how I have to operate to get a man. Like when Steve Harvey came out with that book, what is it? How to
Think like a man.
think
Think.
like a man, think
Yeah,
like a
yeah,
man. Like, so you see so many women, that the whole movie, right? Like women were running to
yeah.
that, right? But like, you don't even think about those things until like you're like, oh my God, like I intrinsically was learning from these things and I didn't even recognize it until now. I sit down, I go to therapy, or something happens, and I'm like, well, where did you learn that from? And I'm
Right.
like, oh, you learned that because you saw it on Instagram, or you read a book, or
Hmm.
you heard it from like a friend who may be further in life than you, right?
Right. Yeah.
So, I would say that I think we all learn a lot and we don't recognize it until something sits us down and makes us recognize that, yeah, you learned that from pop culture because you read the book or you saw the movie where, and even I can think as far as back, and I don't even know what someone was talking about that, even as far as like Disney movies, right? Like the princess and the prince, and you have to be the damsel in distress, and all these
Yeah.
different things. And I think a lot of those things matter. I think femininity matters and all that. I like this whole like feminine energy, masculine energy. I don't know why it's such a big thing these days, but like I think all of those things do matter, and I think we all have different areas of them, and I think we tap into different areas of them as well. But like even being younger, like you have to be a princess to get the prince. So this is how you have to act, and you have to be dainty, and you have to do all these things, and then
Yeah.
learning what being a woman is, and what being feminine is, and what having masculine energy is, and what having feminine energy is. Like all of these things you learn just, growing up, and didn't even realize it until you sit down and you're like, oh, so me acting like that is not going to get me a man because I still don't have a man and I've been acting like this for years. Where did you
Right.
learn that from? Oh, Beauty and the Beast. Oh, Aladdin. Oh, you know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
all of these things. So, yeah, I think I learned a lot from pop culture, and I didn't recognize it. And I don't ever recognize it until I'm sat down in a moment and sit down and think about where I got that idea and that ideology from.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I totally agree because I find myself going through the same thing sometimes. Like, how the fuck I get this thought process?
Right.
Then I'm like, oh, it was in this movie. Like I seen this movie I was watching, and I just naturally gravitated towards it. But it also that ties into what we was mentioned talking about earlier. About the people, the stress, the different types of pressure that people are applied with, because we learn and see these things on pop culture and think this is how we're supposed to act on social media, from reading books, the whole thing. Like a man, example you gave, women ran to their book and thinking, okay, if I do this, this, and that, then shit it be gravy when shit's not gravy. So it's like the pressures from pop culture and social media and all these things is real. What I mean? It really is real. And I think it is important for people to identify what exactly they're learning from pop culture. You know what I mean? If you never actually put a title on or hold that up, then you'll start to believe that you came up with these original ideas and things of that nature and think you're fucking going crazy. Where it's like, no, it's plastered everywhere. We all see it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's all getting to us, buddy. Trust me. um, I do want to ask you, I want to talk about, let's talk suffering in silence. You know what I mean? And if you haven't noticed by now to this podcast, we kind of jump all over the place. This is how I think, so this is the only way I can truly do it. But I do want to talk about suffering in silence. You know what I mean? You had a grief on suicide episode on there. Me personally, I've never been suicidal, but I have slowly but surely these last couple of years starting to understand the mindset of it. You know what I mean? People, we all go through things that we talked about top of this episode. Um, when I was younger, I used to be like, never, I'll never tap out. But as I get older, I do know one clear example. If I was ever put in, I would tap out. So I do want to talk about suffering in silence and how asking for help is hard and people realize.
Yeah. Um, I think there's a lot of most of us suffer in silence. And a lot of that comes from, again, society, pop culture, all of these things that you have to be on, especially with social media. You see everybody's, I say social media, you see everyone's best foot forward or their representative.
Mm-hmm.
It's, you always hear, let's normalize, da 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 da. And I feel like more people are trying to do that, of like coming online. Like I'll come online and you might see me hair twisted. You might see me in a bonnet. You might see me no makeup on, like, because like that's how I am 90% of the time. Like, and if I'm like, if I have a moment, or if I have not a moment, if I have like something in me that I need to get out, then I'm going to come on social media and tell it to you. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But I think many of us suffer in silence because it's not seen. It isn't looked at as courageous to ask for help. And we're all in a space of, oh, well, you have to be strong, strong black woman, strong black man, strong, IND, like all this crazy stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
it's looked at as weak as if you ask for help, as if you're less than. And I think that's why so many of us suffer in silence. Or the juxtaposed to that is that when you say something, it's not received or perceived in the way that you thought. And so, like, you hear a lot of these suicide stories, like with Miss America, right? Apparently, she, and don't quote me on this, but I think I had heard that she, I guess, had tried to share kind of what she was going through, and it was, people are like, "Well, you're Miss America, like, why would you do that?" Right? And so
Yeah.
it's not received in a way that, again, to my point, you don't feel safe, and you don't feel seen, and you don't feel heard. And so why am I going to say how I feel when I'm not going to feel safe, because someone's going to make me feel like my feelings aren't valid? I'm not going to feel heard because you don't understand what I'm going through. And even if you don't understand, you're not making me feel better about going through it. And I don't feel like you see me in the reason why I feel that way. And so it's just easier for me to just keep it here because I don't want to feel that way. Or I'm going to keep it here because I don't want to be a burden. Because that's another thing too. A lot of people like, I don't want to be a burden. Just like you said, you isolate. I don't want to be a burden. And I don't want to put that on somebody because I can just handle it myself. And it's like, no, you cannot handle it yourself. You can, but it's not. How I feel about it is when God made people, like he didn't make Adam to be by himself. He didn't make us to be alone. So why do you feel like that you have to carry this on your own when he literally made us to not be alone? And so, I think that's the biggest thing is like when you ask for help, it's seen as like deemed as you're weaker or lesser than, or you're not as strong. And that's just not true. I think you're stronger for asking for help than trying to handle it on your own. And again, like that feeling of not being seen, safe, and heard, you don't want to feel that way. So I'm just going to hold it, or I don't want to be a burden because, again, like I don't want in being a burden. All that goes back to is being seen, safe, and heard. Because when you feel like you're about to be a burden on somebody, it's because whoever you're about to tell does not make you feel safe enough to come to them to make you feel that way. And so, it's one of those things of that's why it's important to have that support system, but also a therapist, counselor. Even, and I'll say this with therapy. With therapists, sometimes you're not going to find your therapist off the bat. I went to 2 therapists, but I went through 2 therapists before I got to the one that helped me through my grief. And then when I got to a place where she couldn't help me anymore because I knew I needed someone who looked like me, who sounded like me, who could understand my experiences, then I had to move from that. And so what I'll say with that is it's like, well, I tried therapy. Well, did you try it? Did you really go in with an open mind? Number one. And number two, if that person didn't work out, did you try and keep going and try and find someone who really did resonate with you and where you're at in your journey? And so it's really important to find a space that you do feel safe, that you feel seen and you feel heard. And maybe that is with therapy. Maybe that's with church. Maybe that's with the YMCA. Maybe that's with a spouse or significant other, whether that's your parents, right? Making sure that you have that space. And if you don't have that space, actively seeking to find that for yourself. And I think therapy will help a lot in that because it'll allow you to have those conversations with people who you wish would be your safe space to say, like they give you the tools to help you have those conversations with them. And it gives you the tools to know that even if they never become that you still you're still equipped with the tools to be able to create a safe space for yourself and then maybe eventually create a safe space for others too. And so, those are really just my thoughts about why we suffer in silence and how you can kind of try and help yourself in that and know that you're not weak for asking for help. Know that you're not less than, you're actually way stronger to me to ask for help because that takes a level of vulnerability that everyone doesn't want to give.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned the whole therapy, how you went to find someone who looked like you, talk you, sound like you. I had a bad experience with that shit. I'll be honest with you. That's why I said it is important for people to go through numerous therapists until you find the right one. Luckily for me, I will say my first therapist, he was cool. He was great. So we got shit done. Every time I left the session, even though he told me I was much different than all his other clients because I knew my problems. Like I say, even if you feel like nothing's wrong with you, you still go to pop your shit without being, interrupted. It worked, but he got sick and shit, so I had to go find a new therapist. So my thinking was automatically, okay, you know what? Fuck it. Had a white guy. Let's go ahead and get somebody who looks like me, talk like me, act like me, all that good shit. It just didn't work, just for numerous reasons. It wasn't because he was black or no shit like that.
Yeah.
But it was just for numerous reasons. It just didn't work. And when I tell people that story all the time, they was like, "So are you going back?" Yeah, I'm gonna go back, not to him, but I'm gonna still continue therapy.
Right.
Because sometimes you just need an outlet for shit. We go through so much. Like we go through so much on a day-to-day basis. A lot of us never really have time to really just sit down and get shit off our chest. You know what I mean? It builds up. You know what I'm saying? It just builds up. And that's why I tell people all the time. Like I know someone in particular who, went to therapy one time. Therapist told her, "Are you good?" And they never want to go to therapy again. I'm like, no, see that you're good is the open invitation for you to go back. Like
literal open invitation.
You know what I mean? But it's all how people perceive it. You know what I mean? So I'm definitely you made those points clear on this podcast because they hear me say it, they don't really give a damn no more. They don't really give a damn no more. What I do want to get into now on this portion of the podcast, I want to get into your content, your coaching, and things of that nature. So I do want to first start off with what got you into podcasting.
So I've always loved podcasting. Well, I've always loved podcasts. Let me say that.
Okay.
And so I would tell people I never had like the dream or the goal to start a podcast. That was never my vision. That was really God's vision. I tell people he literally gave me the vision at 3:30 in the morning because I knew I wanted to do something with grief. But that was in 2019 after my dad passed, right? So like I'm going through this journey, I'm learning all these things. And then I'm like, okay, cool. Like I have a background in events. Like I have 2 degrees in hospitality, like been doing events all my life, right? Still do events to this day. But I was like, I'm gonna, do grief events. I'm gonna have life insurance. Like I had all this set in my mind, and then March 2020 happened, and it was like, you thought, have a seat. So, I was like, well, dang, like, and I think, I'm very like serious about like if you have desires, God knows them, and He's gonna make them happen regardless. And so that's why I said at 3:30 in the morning, I'm minding my sleeping business, and I got woken up and like just like God was like, I need you to write. So I'm writing down all these ideas, grief topics, just topics on grief, researching like literal podcasts on grief. This 3:30 in the morning, like doing all of this, right? So it really wasn't my idea per se. But I always loved podcasts. Like I love listening to podcasts. I think I got into podcasting around. I got into podcasting early, like before it was like a thing.
Yeah.
I got into it like listening to them, and I was like, oh, these are cool. Like I like these, right? Like I would listen to TD Jakes one, or I would listen to The Read, or like any of those. And so that really is what kind of got me into it. Is God that really got me into it? God gave me the dream and the vision, and I'm just being obedient to that, which is real because I'm like, there's some days I'm like, oh my God, because it changes so much all the time. There's so much information about podcasting that changes all the time. So, I would say that's what got me into it. And then I see a second question here. I like how we have these questions up here.
Oh, yeah. Because I think it's important for people to know, like, because you touched on it earlier in the podcast. You do this full time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and a lot of people don't understand, like, this podcast shit is much harder than people think it is. Especially if you want to monetize it. You know what I'm saying? You're doing it full time, and you're monetizing the things of that nature. You got your ads and things like that. So I think it's important for people to hear your story about how you got into this because it's not by accident. You know what I mean? Like I said, anybody can get a mic, and anybody can get a camera and things of that nature. But when you dive full-fledged into it, to where you're doing this full time and monetizing it, those are the stories that people really need to hear because it's hard to monetize this shit. That's pretty much the hard part. Of course, I know the service you go through. I go through the same service as well, so they make it a little bit easier for us. But even still, reaching those quotas, you know what I'm saying, to get to receive some profit from this shit, it's hard as fuck. So it's like this is a learning process for not only me but anybody out there who wants to get into podcasting and learning your story is amazing to help us in that journey. So the second question, obviously, is how would you describe your podcast? Because you are monetizing and things of that nature, and you have your own lane in my eyes. So how would you describe your podcast, Ms. Loryn Denise?
I would describe my podcast as a safe space. I would describe it as a safe space. I say for millennials, but specifically for millennials, but for anyone who feels in that space of not being seen, not being heard, in the space of grief. So that's how I would describe it, is as that safe space, as that community. I always tell people like we're in this community of grief that none of us asked to be a part of, but we're all trying to heal from. And so that's what I would describe my podcast as that community, as that safe space where we can all feel seen, we can all feel heard, and we can all feel, safe, and understanding that, yes, we're grieving, but we're also trying to still live and be our best selves with this grief.
Yeah. Okay. I fuck with it. It's helping me so far. I'll be honest with that. what is the goal of your podcast? I know you mentioned earlier to make, for the unheard, unseen people to feel comfortable and heard and seen. Um,
Right.
but just to reiterate it, since we have this other line of questioning, it all ties together. What is your goal of the podcast?
So the goal is, and has always been, when I started podcasting, like before it's become what it's become, like my goal will always be that as long as I've helped one person understand that they're not alone in their grieving journey, then I've done what I needed to do.
Mm,
Very simple. I like whoever you are, whoever that person is, if they're like, you know what, me listening to Loryn's story made me feel like I'm not going crazy or I'm not alone, then I've done everything I need to do. As many countries as it's in, as many downloads, that's great. But as long as that one person is healing, then I'm good.
yeah, it's real. I have a similar feeling about my podcast. I get a lot of pleasure and enjoyment for an odd reason, for people I actually know
Mm-hmm.
that let me know that what I'm doing is helping them in life. I mean, it's helping
Yeah.
them chase their goals and things like that. It always feels good when for the people you don't know, you know what I'm saying? People, they say in other countries and shit like that type in. But it's like for some reason, the people I know who probably wouldn't have seen me doing this, you know what I'm saying? For them to tell me, like my uncles, my aunts, like people in my family that I looked up to, when they look at me and be like, no, you doing this shit is actually making me think about doing what I always want to do in life. So it's that inspiration. It's that helping at least one person makes all the hard work worth it. You know what I'm saying? It makes the late night edits worth it. It makes the
Right.
uploads worth it. You know what I mean? Coming up with the content, it makes all that stressful thinking worth it. You know what I mean? So I definitely understand that. Um, I do want to ask this. How the fuck did you did you get to this point to where you could do this full time? I'm not asking for numbers or no shit like that. But how did you get to the point to where like you can do this full time? Because I've been doing this almost 2 years now. You know what I'm saying? And I know there's a huge part in networking and promotion and things of that nature. All things I suck at, by the way. I am getting better. But how did you reach a point to where this could be your, your shit? Because you truly only see that with people who have these crazy, like a deal or something like that, or people who, the Joe Buttons, Joe Rogans,
Mm-hmm.
the other famous, the women podcast, the Read and all that good stuff. How did you reach that point to where you could do this? And I know it's a lot of hard work into it, but just, if you can, just give me some game, please.
Yeah. Well, I think it first all starts with the decision, right? So all those people who you're talking about and me, like we made a decision of like, if I'm going to do this, like I really want to put my all into this, right? And then there's other things that happen behind the scenes that people don't know about. Like even with the Joe Budden with the Read, I think about 85 South, they have their shows that they
Yeah.
do, right? Or even Joe Budden was an artist and he's producing and doing whatever stuff. So he's still making money over here, even though he's making these podcast deals with the Read. They have merch and they have all this other stuff that they
Mhm.
have going on. They're making money with me. Like I still can go and do an event and make money over here too, right? But also like super committed to this process and understanding and learning this process. And so I think that's the biggest thing with, and I was telling you about this earlier, maybe we'll touch on this later. There's a difference between like podcasting and being a podcaster. It's not
Yeah,
about the
please.
number of episodes. It's not about, having the amount of followers and subscribers. It's the mindset. Like you have to have the mindset. That's what makes you a podcaster. It's not about if you have 100 episodes. It's not about if you have a million subscribers. That's not any of that. If you don't have the mindset, you can have all of that stuff and you can like go off tomorrow and be gone. Right.
Mm,
So like having the mindset to know, to your point and to my point, like as long as if my goal is to help one person, I'm going to focus on that goal. And if that's me sharing this episode, that's going to help that one person in this one, like where we're talking about grief and podcast and all that stuff, then I'm good. Right. Like, I think that like having that mindset to know that like, there's always going to be somebody out here who doesn't like my podcast. There's always going to be somebody out here who thinks my voice is annoying. There's always going to be a troll out there. There's always going to be something, very
mhm.
much something, as they say. There's going to be
Yeah.
something out there that's going to always not align with who I am, but that's okay because I'm aligning and doing God's work that I know I'm sent here to do, right? And
Yeah.
so like I think the biggest thing is first having the decision to say if I'm going to do this full time, you have to commit. Podcasting is not for the faint of heart. Like if you want to be a podcaster, it's not for the faint of heart, especially when you're doing a lot of it on your own. You know, editing and marketing and the admin, all that stuff, right? Like if you don't have a team behind you, a lot of those people have teams behind them. If you don't have a team behind you, which for me, like I'm now starting to develop a team, right? But like it's been me and my producer for a long time. And so like now I'm starting to develop people who like want to help with social media and want to help with all these things, right? You know, want to help uploading and production and all these things. But that came with time, right?
Yeah.
But it's because I made the decision that I want to be a podcaster. When people look at me, what do I want them to look at me to be known for? One of my good girlfriends said this. I love her. She was like, you can have several things going on, but like when people look at you, what do you want them to look at you for? Like, what do you want to be known for? And for me, I want to be known as the queen of grief, right? And the reason that I am that is because I have this podcast, right? Like, yes, I have events, but you didn't know that until I just said that.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you know, I'm a podcaster and I help people podcasting because that's what you see. Because that's like, you know what I'm saying? So, like, making that decision of like, I want to be a podcaster, so I need to start operating as a podcaster. And I have to have the mindset of a podcaster and I have to understand the work that comes with that. But if I never made that decision, none of that stuff would have happened.
Damn. Damn. Like, because I totally understand. Like, I totally understand you. Like, it's a mindset thing. You know what I mean? And like I said, for everybody that's listening, in the pre-me, she got on my ass about me saying I'm not a podcaster yet.
I did.
Because my whole thing is I want to reach 100 episodes and things of that nature and all that hoopla. But listening to you and giving your reasons to what makes a podcaster, it's like, damn, bro, am I really a motherfucking podcaster?
You're a literal podcaster. You're a literal podcaster.
But it is important because it's the mindset, because like I said, when you mentioned not having a team and things of that nature, there's a lot you take on throughout this process. You know what I'm saying? And I think a lot of people, they don't understand that. It's kind of like when you start like a rapper or some shit. It's like people don't understand like the real grind that goes into it. It's not just about coming up with the words and getting on camera. It's like, no, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that if you're really not dedicated to it, then you won't have your weekly uploads. You won't meet your season totals. You know what I'm saying? You won't reach those things because you're not dedicated to it. Because life goes on. You have to make time for this shit or make this your life. Like I tell people all the time. I was talking to one of my guests, CEO of The Source, and we were talking about the process. And I asked him, are you enjoying the process? And we both agreed that I have to enjoy the process of this because it's now my life. And it was like at that moment in time, I was like, damn, should I take not a podcaster out of my bio? Because this is my life. Like the progression of this show is everything I'm living for right now. Because this is like my goal. This is my journey on doing things I want to do in life. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I graduated from college and all that, but that really wasn't for me. That was to show my little brother it was possible. This podcast is literally for me. This is my baby. Like, I want to see this mature into damn the greatest show on earth. So it's like, I totally understand when you talk about the grind, the process you have to go through, and the mindset change you have to actually do this full fledged. And I commend you for doing this because it's amazing. Like you said, most of those people have teams, they have deals and things of that nature. To see someone as at your stature, which is large as fuck to me, to see you doing what you're doing is nothing short of impressive, sensational, and definitely fucking inspiring. So I want to say thank you again for coming on this podcast and giving me that game.
Of course.
As we talk about, the mindset switch and all that, and all these people who look into podcasting and want to start a new show and things of that nature, you are, so you do coach and you do help people and talk about how to start podcasts and things of that nature. I want to ask you about the grind of starting a podcast. Just a quick, what to do, what not to do, things like that. Because I follow you on Instagram, of course, and like you said, you have content to make. I'm sure it'll be about, help to start a podcast and things of that nature and surround around your episodes and things like that. But let's talk about a quick, few what to do's and what not to do when it comes to starting a podcast.
Yeah. So what to do is the first thing. I'll say the first two things is understand. I think the first thing is what do you want to talk about? right? What do you want to talk about? If you're like, I just want to talk about everything. Okay, well, if you're talking about everything, you're talking about nothing, right?
Mm,
So,
mm.
what do you want to talk about? What
My
can you talk
God.
about? What can you talk about? That nobody else can talk about, right? Like I can talk about grief like no other. That's just, like you said, pop your collar. It just is what it is.
Facts.
Right? Like, what is that thing that you want to talk about and what can you talk about that nobody else can talk about in the man? It doesn't matter if people are talking about it already. What can you talk about? Right.
Mm,
And then the second thing is why do you want to start a podcast? And so those could be interchangeable. It could be one and two. It doesn't two and one. It doesn't matter. But why do you want to start a podcast? Do you want to start a podcast just because it's the cool thing to do right now? Or do you want to
right.
start a podcast because like Hatch and I are talking about, like you really want to inspire people. You really want to make people feel safe or whatever your thing is. Or do you want to just start it because you feel like that's like the wave right now? Because that's what's happening. There's a lot of people who will release a podcast and won't do anything with it. There's a statistic that says 51% of people who release a podcast have 10 episodes or less, while 17% have 50 episodes or more. Right. So Hatch
Mm,
and I fall into that 17%. And Hatch is even higher than I am in that percentage because he has more episodes than I do. Right. And so, like, it just starts getting smaller and smaller. And so, really, why do you want to start a podcast? Are you just going to start a podcast because you think it's cool, because you see all the celebrities do it, because you see me and Hatch doing it? Or do you really want to start a podcast because you really have a mission and you really want to impact somebody? Right? Or you really feel like your story can make a difference? Or do you just want to talk? Because you can go
right.
get a YouTube channel and go talk to talk. You can
Right.
do that. You can get on Clubhouse and go talk to talk. Like you can
Right.
do all types of stuff and just talk to talk. Like a
Yeah.
lot of people just want to like pop their collar and feel like they're important because you have a podcast. Because at the end of the day, with podcasting, it does put you in a space that you do have an expertise and you kind of like set yourself as like an expert in the industry, whatever that
Hmm.
industry is for you, right? And so
Yeah.
like a lot of people, like they just want to feel, they want to smell themselves, and you, but you can tell that by their podcast sometimes, right? Or you could
Hmm.
tell that by like, production quality, or like, lack of like you could tell a lot of that because you're like, I got a podcast, y'all. And then it's like you get 5 episodes in and now you're bored with the topic, or you 5 episodes in and then now, like you said, when you got a late night edit, or I got to make content on a Saturday when I've been doing stuff all week, right? Like you're like, I'm not doing all that. I'm gonna go to brunch. Are you crazy? Like,
Right.
you know what I'm saying? Like, so like think about why it is that you really want to start a podcast and what does that look like?
Yeah.
What does that look like? When you, so I know, I know what I want to talk about. I know why I want to do it. And what does that look like for me? Is it, I just want to, drop an episode, a couple, whatever, like it's fine. Or like, what does that look like? If you had if your podcast, I always think about your podcast is like a TV show, like Law and Order has 77 million seasons, right? So it's like,
Best
if
show
you,
ever.
best show ever. I got to catch up on it today. But if you literally, if you have a podcast, right, and your podcast was a TV show, how many seasons of that would that be? Because so many people will be like, I want to talk about. I used this analogy on my Q&A the other day. I have this stapler. So I'm like, oh my God, like I want to talk about this stapler. Well, why do you want to talk about the stapler? Because I just think it's a really amazing invention. Okay, well, what does that look like for you to talk about the stapler? Well, I'm going to talk about the mechanics of it. I'm going to talk about the look of it. I'm going to talk about how it sounds. I'm going to talk about the staple, right? Like now I'm getting bored
Yeah.
because what am I talking about? So
Right.
like, I could talk about grief forever because I'm passionate about it, number one. And because number two, there's grief in everything. So
Yeah.
it's a never ending season.
It's
So,
raining grief.
right. It's like Law and Order grief VU. So like,
Grief be you.
right. You know what I'm saying? Like I can talk about it forever. So those are the main things. Like, so what not to do is to just, I would say don't just start a podcast because it's a cool thing to do. Don't do that because you're not going to, you're like, you could, what do you just want to say in your past life? I had a podcast. Cool story,
Right.
bro. Cool story. Like,
Right.
so don't just start a podcast just to start one, and really think about what it is you want to talk about, why you want to do that, and what that looks like for you. And these are all, you see, I didn't give you I gave you mindset things.
Yeah. Yeah. All mindset things. All mindset things. And I will, and just to add for anybody out there, if I can,
You
don't get
can.
discouraged when shit is going downwards. because it happens. I had to learn from like I want to say year 2 was starting to pick up, but year 2 for the most part was much harder than year 1. Year 1, you come out the gates, you know what I'm saying? You're feeling good, like, God, I can do this shit. But then you don't take into the simple fact that things happen in life, you know what I'm saying? Things like that, holidays, we back outside, you know what I'm saying? I don't know if you noticed, but like so we both started top of the pandemic, I hit the ground running. Niggas wasn't doing shit. Everybody was in the house. But once they start opening things up, you see the numbers and stuff starting to dwindle down a little bit. And it's up to you to stay consistent and keep a positive mindset to keep going. So for anybody out there, man, you can't be discouraged if this is something you really want to do. You just got to do it. You know what I mean? Like I said, I gave a definition of why I named this podcast The Thin Line Between Genius and Insanity. But another one is because they say to become great at something, you have to practice. You do something over and over and over again. But the definition of insanity is doing something over and over and over again, expecting a different result. So there's a thin line. You have to balance that and just keep a positive mindset. If this is something you really want to fucking do, take all of her mindset advice and to just sprinkle my never give up.
Yeah, I was going to say, no, that's good. That's
just
good.
Never give up, man. Never fucking give up. So I do want to ask you this, because we talked about earlier in the podcast. It was either the pre-meet or in the live show. We only got like two or three more topics for we.
I know. Sorry, y'all. This might have to be 2 episodes. This is a long one. My bad. It's gonna be part 1, part 2.
Probably so. People love these long ones. I hate doing the long ones, but it's like the conversation just
part 1, part 2 is good. You get an hour the first second and an hour the second half. You're welcome.
Thank me later. I do want to talk about the moment that sex becomes unhealthy. You touched on the episode that you had, and it really resonated with me because it's something that I go through on a lot. Like, I think a lot of people really don't think about it in this way. But I do want to talk about the moment sex becomes unhealthy. If you can, just, a quick debrief on that if you want to.
Yeah. You are so funny. You know that? Because you like put stuff, like I see how your mind works. I'm like, heck, we could have talked about this back here. I love it though. I love it because if you're listening to part 2, now you gotta go back to part 1 to see what we're talking about and vice versa. So
see how I operate.
Right. I see. You see that genius in this? I see you, Hash. I see what's going on in your mind. I got you. I'm picking up what you're putting down. But I'll say the moment becomes sex unhealthy. So the episode he's talking about, I had a sex therapist on, and we were talking about the grief of sex because again, learning from pop culture. So I grew up in a household that, I could specifically, we never had like the birds and the bees conversation. We just didn't talk about sex. Like, and so it's funny. Like I look at kids now and I'm like, I didn't know anything about sex when I was that young. Like I was just like, what yeah. Like I did, you know what I mean? Like I was like, was I sheltered, was I slow? Like I don't know, but because we just didn't talk about it in my household. And then when I started having sex, like my dad literally sat me and my sister down and he was like, I know y'all are having sex. And I immediately was like, oh my God, is it a smell on me? How does he know? Like I just like went into this weird space because we never talked about it, right? And so we learned different from pop culture, from friends, from family, from church, whatever it is. Like, obviously I learned from me growing up in the church, like I had a purity ring. So it was like, you're not having sex till marriage. The reason why it's because it's bad, right? Like we didn't really go into why you shouldn't have sex before marriage and all of that, right? And that's kind of the way I operated. And then obviously growing up and, not having really the conversation in my household and being around my friends who were having sex at a way younger age than I was like, huh. And it's like, well, you have sex when, watching Love and Basketball and, having that amazing sex scene that they have. And I'm like, wow, like, that's going to be great. I'm like, the first time I had sex, it hurt. Okay. I don't know what y'all were talking about. There was no Maxwell playing in the background. Like that hurt. You know what I'm saying? Like it was, none of that was happening. Okay. It was hurt and it hurt for a very long time. Okay. So like, yeah. I was like, bro, I'm cool. Like that's what I waited all this time for. Like, it's a no for me, dog. I'm gonna just have to wait. So, specifically, for grief, when it becomes unhealthy is because, again, it's that coping versus managing, right? And so for me, with my mom, that's why I said I had to understand I didn't process it correctly. With my mom, my vice was sex. Like I would call guys and be like, hey, like come through, and then I'll be like, okay, cool, like that's it. Like we don't need to cuddle, we don't need to do all that. Like, I was, oh God, I was savage. But like, like, right, just pray for me, y'all. But like, it was one of those things, right? And it was unhealthy for me, and the sex therapist and I kind of had that conversation. She was like, well, it becomes unhealthy when you don't recognize the reason why you're doing it. So for me, I recognize the reason why I was doing that is because I was coping at the time. Obviously, I didn't know I was coping, but like if I started feeling bad, I would call them to make me feel good. So then I didn't feel bad anymore.
Right.
Thinking about my mom, right? Even though the next day it would come back because I never managed it, like we were talking about in part 1. Y'all gotta listen. We talked about it, right? So that where it becomes unhealthy is you're just like out here doing it. You don't really have a reason why. For me, the reason was because I didn't want to feel that way. A lot of people are just kind of like in a space where they're just having sex to have sex, but there's no real reason why. And it's like, well, why you have to have a reason to have sex? It's not that you have to have a reason, but when you're just like out here, I'll say again, specifically for grief, and you're just having sex to have sex to have sex to have sex. And at some point you become disattached from like the fact that the reason I'm doing it is because I don't want to feel. And now you're kind of disattached from that. And you're just like, I mean, I've just always done it, or I'm just doing it. That's when it becomes unhealthy because there's no reason in your mind. So now you're not only like just having sex to have sex, but you're putting yourself at risk every time you have sex, because at the end of the day, like if you can get pregnant, STDs can happen, all types of stuff can happen. They talk about soul ties, all your energy's being transferred, right? You laying down with all these people, you wonder why you feeling bad the next day. Well, yeah, this person's depressed. So now you don't put them, and oh my God, I just heard it recently. Like the most intimate way that you can be is that a man, woman, whatever, goes inside of you. That's the closest someone can be, is inside of you, right? Like I can tell you everything, Hatch, but like the closest that we can be is if you are inside of someone, regardless, because now this person has entered inside of your body, somewhere that only food and only certain things enter, right? And so
wait
now
a minute. Wait a minute. Food and enters what?
your body.
Oh, I was going to say, hold on, Loryn.
Oh no, ain't nobody cucumber, ain't nobody doing none of that craziness. No.
Slow your fucking roll, Loryn. we went from talking about this and you talking about inserting food. Hold on.
You're hilarious. No, I'm talking about in your mouth, food, water, and now a person is entering inside of you, and that's the closest they can be to you. So now you have created this intimacy, this closeness, whether you are having a one night stand or not. There is this certain closeness that just comes with someone being inside of you. And so that's when it becomes unhealthy, is when you don't have like a reason as to why you're just consistently doing this, or understanding the reason why you're doing it. Maybe you're just like, what are you talking about? I got a reason. I just love sex. Well, that's your reason. Your reason is that you love sex. Right. So like, that's your reason. If you don't have a reason and you're just like having sex to be having sex, that's unhealthy, sweetheart.
Yeah. Unhealthy as fuck. I've been there, trust me. I've had a lot of unhealthy sex. And when it's over, it's just like, yeah, fam, what the fuck?
Right.
Why?
Exactly. When you start feeling like that, you're like, oh God, like, why did I do that? And we've all been there. If you've had sex, unless you just, had sex one time with your partner and y'all got married, like we've all been like, why did I do that? That's unhealthy. Because why did you do it in the first place? That's unhealthy.
As fuck. My next question. Like you said, I jump all over the place, but we're getting close to wrapping this podcast up. So I do want to ask you about the personal benefits of traveling. You know what I'm saying? I got on your social media. I seen you've been to London. Seen you've been to another place. I just can think off the top of my head.
Thailand.
You in Thailand?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, you different. We gotta talk about that. I've traveled, you know what I'm saying? I've been to Jamaica, Mexico, and all that good shit. I want to go to the Bahamas. I want to go to
Yeah.
Africa and things like that. Uh, but I also pick up on a lot of new things when I travel. You know, I learn things about myself. So my question to you is, what have you learned about yourself and the personal benefits of traveling?
What have I learned about myself? Well, I would say the personal benefits of traveling is getting outside of the norm and what you've known. Every time I go somewhere, and you don't have to, people are like, well, you've been to Thailand, you've been here. Well, first of all, I was a flight attendant. So let's be very clear on that. So, I've been a lot of places, right?
That's probably the
Um,
best job in the world, isn't it?
um, it depends. Yes and no. It just depends on what part of your life that you're at. For me, I was young. I didn't have any attachments. I was living life. Like as a trying to start a family and stuff. Like that's to me where it gets a little sticky. So it just depends. But yes, like I had at that time of my life, I was young. I had a good time. Like I had a great time being a flight attendant. But I also got to a place where I got complacent and I knew I
Mhm.
needed more. And if I stayed there, then I was going to be complacent. So um yeah, so yeah, that's a whole nother conversation. But I would say some of the benefits are just getting a different perspective,
Yeah,
right? If you always stay in your hometown and you don't go anywhere, like you never get a different perspective. And like that, you don't even have to travel as far as I have. Like you could be like I'm in North Carolina and I can travel to Georgia and see something different, or I can travel to New York or California or Idaho or Texas, right? Like you get a different perspective on life, right? Because if you're always comfortable, right? And if you're always around the same things and you always see and experience the same things, how can you expect yourself to operate and excel and be at a higher level if you don't know any different? You don't know any different. You've never been around anything different. You've never seen anything different. You don't
yeah,
know anybody different. Right. And so I think that's one of the biggest personal benefits. And especially traveling out of the country, is you get a deeper appreciation for your journey. Right. Especially going to like those third world countries. Like we were in Thailand and everybody, like, first of all, like people talk about like, oh my God, like Thailand, but it's so cheap over there. Like
yeah.
we spent we would go outside every day and get soda, like handcrafted homemade fresh soda that the man like squeezed from the fruit, made it fizzy, and it was like $2, which was like 20 baht, which was two US dollars. And we were like, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And we would
Yeah.
give him like 50. He's like, oh, and we were just like, no, like, what? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you just
Yeah.
get a deeper appreciation for like your journey and kind of like your struggles of like, yes, like these are first world problems, as I say, because like this man is like hyped that we gave him $5.
Yeah.
And we're like, no, sir, like we are hyped that you are even offering this to us.
That you taking this $5, my brother.
You know what I'm saying? Like, are you crazy? Like, I will give you $100, like, because this is like fresh, it's good. Like, you're out here
Mhm.
every day, every night, like for hours on your feet. Like, you know what I'm saying? So it just gives you a deeper appreciation for the things that you have. It gives you so much gratitude for the things you have, and it opens you up to a different perspective to make you just a better person. Because again, like if you're in your hometown forever and you're like, well, I've never really traveled outside of here, or the furthest I've gone is, this state. It's like, yes, travel outside of that. Learn from somebody different. Learn from somebody in the north if you're in the south. Learn from somebody from the west coast if you're in the east coast. Learn
Yeah.
from somebody in Jamaica if you're in the Bahamas. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, just it gives you just such a deeper gratitude for life and just a deeper perspective and understanding for like what life and literally what this world, there's so many things in the world, like this world, as crazy as it is, it really is a beautiful place, and it makes you think like, wow, like this is such a beautiful space that I have the opportunity to like be here and live on.
No, definitely, definitely. When I traveled, I say even when I went to Mexico, you know what I mean? I remember it was like a fucking can of Planters peanuts, like this fucking big. And it was like in their dollars, it was like 170 something dollars. But
Hmm.
in US dollars, it was only like $3 or some shit like
Right,
that.
you're like,
I was like, oh shit. Like if I came to Mexico on a check, don't let me get paid, just go to
mm-hmm.
Mexico. I'll be that nigga. Pesos for everybody.
Pesos, 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 pesos.
For real. But it did give you and then just going through the neighborhoods, you know what I'm saying, the rural areas and things like that,
Hmm.
it gave you a different give you a level of appreciation for what you got going on back at home, just because it could have been different. You know what I'm saying? I tell people all the time, like a lot of people's circumstances in life is just based on where they were born. You know what I'm saying? It could have been us born in, you know what I'm saying, these fucked up third world countries. No offense to nobody, but you know, when your shit's fucked up, it's fucked up. But we were born in America. You know what I mean? We didn't have any control over that. You know what I'm saying? We're lucky to just be in the situation that we're in. It always just comes back to, you know what I'm saying, taking advantage of your opportunities, because everyone doesn't have those same opportunities afforded to them. So traveling outside the country, traveling, you know, outside the state, just traveling, period, helps, guys. It really does help your mindset and evolve in life. Before we wrap into the quick hitters and wrap this podcast up, I do want to introduce this segment of Girl You the Shit and give you, and give you the flowers that you truly deserve. Like I mentioned at the top of this podcast, it truly was an honor to have you on this platform, just because I see what you got going on. You know, for you to give me your time a day, we've been talking over 2 hours now. You know what I'm saying? I've really enjoyed this episode. So much free game, so much game, not only for me, but for people that's out there tapping, enjoying the conversation. I love what you're doing. You know what I'm saying? You're very guest centric. And what I mean by that is that you bring these guests on, you let them share their story, and you do it in a way to where they become very vulnerable and they open up to you, and not only to you, but to everyone who's tapped and joined that conversation. And it helps shine light on what people are going through. Like, so I was in the gym having to pause shit, like, what the fuck? Like hold on, but don't slam them weights, nigga. I'm listening to this. Like, you know what I'm saying? But it's like, that's what I like to do. When I bring guests on, I allow them to tell their story. You know what I'm saying? I talk all the time. I do solo episodes. Last week was an hour and 45 minutes. So it's like, bringing these guests on, I want to make sure that I let them express themselves. And I think your story is so dope. You know what I'm saying? You went through 2 traumatic experiences that really break people. You know what I'm saying? It really fucking breaks people. And to see what you're doing, how you turn that into a positive, turn that into your newfound career. You know what I'm saying? You're moving all over the goddamn states, and you're finding your home. You know what I'm saying? And you're going with it. You know what I'm saying? I can't do nothing but commend that, because that's some shit that I want to do. You've reached levels that I aspire to get to, and just having you on this podcast, it really is an honor for me. You know what I'm saying? I truly didn't know whether or not you was going to respond back to me. When you did, I was happy. You know what I'm saying? I truly think you're an amazing person. The goal of this podcast is to always bring on dope Black content creators and dope Black people, period. And so to be able to add you to that list is a huge milestone for this podcast. It really is.
I'm honored. You're about to get me emotional. You know, it don't take me nothing to cry. So please, look, I'm like, woo, thank you. That's kind. I appreciate. It's an honor to be here. Honestly,
I truly appreciate that. Let's go ahead and get these quick hitters in, so I can let you go about your day. Enjoy your wonderful Saturday. She is on East Coast time for everyone that's tapped and joined the conversation. After this, I'm making breakfast. I'm walking my dog and making breakfast.
Right. I'm like, what am I going to eat for lunch and dinner? But I'm like, but what content do you have to do? I literally have on my calendar playing content for the week. So
I have to get some clips out from last week's episode. So I definitely understand that. Let's get into these quick hitters real fast, so I can let the lovely Miss Loryn Denise on her way. Let's do it.
Ready.
20s or hundreds. Stack of money, same amount of money. 20s or hundreds.
20s.
Yeah, I'm a 20s nigga. I ain't breaking the hundreds. I ain't breaking those hundreds at all.
People don't be, give me 20s.
Burgers or tacos?
Oh my God, what? Burgers. No. Yeah. Oh God.
You can never go wrong with a good burger.
Tacos burger on the grill. Yeah, tacos. Yeah, burger on the grill. Grilled burger. Juicy burger.
With the works. Give me the works.
With the works.
Mondays or Fridays?
Ooh. I think it don't matter as an entrepreneur, child.
Yeah, it's different for you. Yeah. I still got the white man on my back, so.
We all still do. Don't worry about it. Fridays. I don't know.
I'm a Mondays guy. I hate Fridays, actually. Monday's my favorite day of the week. Hip hop or R&B?
R&B.
New school R&B or old school R&B?
90s R&B all day long.
Okay. Uh, I don't know if you cruise or resort. Have you been in one of these?
Resort.
Yeah. Oh, why?
Are you serious?
I hate resorts. I hate resorts.
I don't
I love.
understand.
You know why? We're just real. I'll say this because
Yeah, because I'm confused. I need explanations.
I feel like it's too spaced out. I feel like it's not as live as a cruise. Like you gotta go certain areas on a resort to find the it thing. On a cruise, you just there. You know what I'm saying? Everything is like right there in the central hub. You know what I mean? And on a resort, I did find myself getting tired of walking my ass all the way across the goddamn map to find this club, this party, this and that. When the cruise is just right there. And also you travel to different, islands and shit like that as well. So
Okay,
that's
see,
why I
I
like it.
think that this is an age difference. This is where we differ because I need rest. And when I don't want to go party, I go party. If I want good food, I'm gonna go over here. I understand. I got it.
Yeah. I may reach that point soon enough. I'm
You
just happy
will.
I was
You
fortunate to
will.
be
I
there.
told my sister the same thing when she turned 30, and she did. Don't worry
Yeah.
about it. It'll happen.
Mindset just completely changes.
It just switches.
Winter or summer?
Summer. Oh
Eh,
Lord.
I'm a summer baby, but I love the winter. Because in St.
Mm-mm.
I
I don't like
miss
cold.
I miss Christmas. I miss snowy Christmas. I truly do. Out
Mm-mm.
here in AZ, this shit is a pathetic.
Yeah, no,
I
there's
forget
no
it's
snow.
Christmas. I forget it's Christmas out in this motherfucker.
Yeah, no, I
Like,
get it. I don't. But see, you're in Arizona, so I get what. No, I don't like cold. And I just
okay.
I like sundresses. Like I like to be like super cute. Yeah, I
Yeah.
feel like I'm bundled in the winter. I don't like that.
Yeah, but it's sundress season all year long in this motherfucker. I
It
love
is in
it.
Arizona.
Love
Oh
it.
my god.
Christmas or New Year's?
Christmas.
Mm. Okay.
Oh Lord, Hatch, you just don't. What is it,
Nah,
Hatch? Why
nah,
why don't you like Christmas? What's up?
nah, it's just more so like a family thing. My dad, he died like 3 days before Christmas.
That's
And it's
fair.
like that time around the year is like, yeah.
That's
Then
fair.
New Year's is like, I feel like a New Year's you set new goals for yourself.
You
You
do.
know what I'm saying? I feel like that's the only holiday you truly do that. You may do it on your birthday or some shit like that, but I feel like on New Year's is the only time you truly set new goals for yourself.
You should do it every quarter, to be honest.
See, that's that entrepreneurship talking. um, so let me ask you this. Let's see if there's an age difference with this question. Solo trips or group trips?
It depends on the group. So I
Mm,
think, yeah. But like I have a group trip coming up for it just depends on the group. I like group trips. But solo trips, like I also don't have to be worried about what you're doing. But what I will say is as I've gotten older, I understand that in the groups that I travel with, we don't have to be on the same itinerary. If you want to sleep and not go to this, you don't have to go. That's fine.
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So I guess it just depends on the group. So I like group trips because I like to, hang out with other people, but also like I like being by myself on trips too.
Yeah. I've I've done. It's weird because I've been on group trips, but I was like, it was a solo trip for me.
Right.
Like I'm with y'all, but like I ain't with y'all. I'll see
Yeah.
y'all in passing. So it
And
does
that's
depend on the
okay.
group.
And that's what a group trip should be. Like, we
Yeah,
don't have to have here's the itinerary. If you want to come to this, that's great. If not, live your life. We're all
yeah,
adults and we all paid money. So I'm gonna
right,
do what I want to do.
exactly. Now I like that. Last one. It's kind of a two-part because I want to know what place out here and a place out there in North Carolina, I believe you said.
Uh-huh.
Uh,
Uh-huh.
Give me the low-key fire go-to meal. Let's start with out here in Phoenix, AZ. Like a spot to where you knew about it, it wasn't really probably that popping, or even if it is popping, a meal that was your go-to.
I'm trying to think. What did I in Arizona? That was so long ago, Hatch. Jeez. What was that restaurant? It was in oh my god, what's it called? I don't even know if this would classify as a meal, but it's like a little spot. So there was a place in Arizona called Postino's. I don't know if you've heard of it,
No.
but on Tuesdays they would have a wine and bruschetta night. I don't know if they still have it. They do. Check it out. But you would get like a bottle of wine and like bruschetta for like $20 or something like that. And me and my friend would go there and like we would get like 2 bottles of wine, a whole charcuterie board, and like be lit and having a great time for like $40. Like,
Mm.
yeah. But like if you're not a person who's gonna eat like, different bruschetta, like because you can choose your different stuff that's on there. But if you're like, I want a steak, like that's not the place to go. Like, because they're not giving you that, right? So that I would say that was like, kind of our hidden gem when I lived in Arizona. Because there was another place in Scottsdale, but I cannot remember the name we went to for brunch. That was a good time.
Okay.
In Charlotte, I just moved here, so I'm still trying to kind of find my way
Yeah.
and find different things. But I went to this winery the other day, and that burger, see this on top, that burger that I had there was so good. It's called Foxcroft Wine Co. And they have this burger. Oh my God. I was just like, y'all are a wine. Like, why do y'all have a burger that tastes this good?
Right.
Like, it
Where's the
was
chef?
right. I was just like, y'all specialize in wine. Why does this burger taste this good? So, like, that for now, as of today, because again, I'm still trying to get out there and find things. But that place and that burger, and they have like good wine because they make their own wine and they have a vineyard and stuff. Like, I literally bought a bottle of wine and brought it home because it was so good. So, I would say that place again for now.
No, it's good. I see are you a wine connoisseur?
I do enjoy wine. I do enjoy wine.
See, I'm gonna start upping my game in whole wine thing.
Yeah, as long as you don't drink Stella Rosa, Moscato. I mean, no
Mhm.
shade to anyone who does,
No.
but as your palate grows,
Yeah.
you don't necessarily you understand those are like dessert wines. So
Yeah. Nah. I want to start drinking the big shit. No, I want to go to a winery one day though.
you should. They have some good ones.
Yeah, I say one day I'm gonna package that in with like an art museum type you know what I'm saying, stravaganza. Um but that's all I got for the quick hitters. That's all I got for the quick hitters. Before I let you out of here, I do want to ask you, for all friends of the show, how can they get in touch with you? How can they find you? What you got coming? What they got going on? Like let the people know.
Yeah, let the people give the people what they want. So,
Mm-hmm.
you can find me a couple ways. So, on all social medias, you can find me at This Too Shall Suck Podcast. That's with 2 O's. And on YouTube as well. Just type in This Too Shall Suck Podcast. If you are interested in, learning more about the podcasting side, you can actually find me on my coaching, I'll say, podcast or Instagram at Loryn Denise, which is LORYNDENISE. And I know he'll probably have all this in the show notes, so don't worry, guys.
Also in the description.
Right. Just but I do have a profitable podcast playbook where I go over the 3 strategies that millennials like myself and others are using to start that podcast and make that shmoney, or download those turn those downloads into dollars without having a large following. All you have to do is go to profitablepodcastplaybook.com. So I have something coming up with that. I'm actually in the works. I don't know if I can even say this. Is this exclusive? So I know, right? So I currently have a program, but I'm actually working on a course to help take you from having this amazing idea to having a podcast to literally launching a successful podcast and learning the different ways that you can monetize it. Because there's a lot of people who think there's only like one specific way, but there's so many ways that I have put into this course to show you how you can actually start making money from the podcast and not just those sponsorships that everybody is so keen on.
Yeah.
Different ways that they can start as 99 cents and next thing you know, you've made 10,000 from it, right? Just because you've set it up the proper way. So, so I have a course coming out, and then I also kind of have a spinoff. I don't even want to call it spinoff, but that's the only thing I think of the podcast called Dear Grief. It's a series that's going to be live on YouTube and Facebook at the current moment, where I'm going to invite listeners on to talk about their grief stories. because obviously I can't have everybody and their mama on the podcast, but
Yeah.
this will allow them the space to be able to talk about their grief stories and then put the love back into grief, because we're going to write a letter to grief and you're going to put the love back into it. So that's going to be coming soon as well. So make sure you follow my podcast page for that. Yeah, that's what I got going on. That's how you can find me. And I do respond to DMs. You can ask Hatch. That's how he responded to me.
Trust me, I was surprised, but yes, I definitely got a response back. You got a response back, and I will be tapping in with that profitable playbook.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
we gotta talk, Hatch. I told Hatch, I said, Hatch, I gotta give you some stuff, because
yes, get your boy right. Get your boy right. But I do want to say once again, thank you for coming on this platform. I know I've said it many times, but thank you. In all honesty, this conversation has been wonderful for me. I'm sure it's gonna be wonderful for all the people that's tapping and enjoying this conversation, all the friends of the show. And I learned a lot. I truly motherfucking did. This was everything. It was everything I expected and some. And I was nervous because it was early as fuck. And I was like, bro, hopefully I just don't, you know what I'm saying? Fuck this all up. But I'm truly happy the way this turned out. I truly am. And I just want to say, keep going. I know you don't need me to tell you that, but I just want to say it, keep going, because you're special. You know what I mean? You're special. You got something going. You know what I mean? And I say it's rare for me to come across other podcasts and I'd be like, they ain't fucking with me at all.
Right.
But like your shit, I truly fuck with it and I can listen to it, because I've listened to podcasts since like 2015. You know what I'm saying? I had a thought of making a podcast. Yeah, right. Way before the wave. And I was thinking about making a podcast years before I actually did it. I had to push myself to do it. And with you got your own lane, because I want to listen to your stuff continuously. I stopped listening to other people's stuff because I didn't want to, have ideas and share ideas and stuff like that. But I can actually listen to your podcast because I can learn some shit from your podcast, and it's helping me internally. You know what I mean? So please keep going. Don't stop. And I will meet you at the motherfucking top.
You will. I appreciate that. Thank you. It was an honor to have me on here. You keep going. You keep being awesome. And you know that you are a podcaster. Okay. You don't have to have 100 episodes to be a podcaster. Just keep literally out here inspiring people. So thank you for this opportunity. It was a pleasure and an honor. And I mean that.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And you know how we wrap it up on this side, man. I want to say shout out to everybody around the world that's tapped in, enjoying the motherfucking conversation. Let's keep building this empire brick by brick. Shout out to my first time listeners and my last time listeners. Y'all are the ones that keep this shit going. And you know how I give it up on this side? It's all love these ways. Never let them sidetrack you with the bullshit. Always keep the main thing the main thing. Stay safe, stay sharp, stay sane. And I'll holler at y'all next week, man. I'm out this motherfucker. Peace. Loryn Denise. Loryn Denise. This was magnificent. This was wonderful. This was fucking wonderful. This was wonderful.
No, this was great. I enjoyed it a lot.